Chapter 754. Bang! 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 At this moment, Yi Xing had already pulled the bowstring 3 times in a row. The speed of the flowing star sword was too fast. It was too late to condense the arrow and shoot it. However, shooting out the starlight ripples was only a matter of seconds. A slight gap was enough. 3 layers of black flame ripples rushed out from the Wuxuan bow, one layer after another. This was the strongest attack that Yi Xing could achieve when shooting out the starlight ripples. The first layer of black flame ripples was instantly broken by the sword light, and then the second layer. When the flowing star sword broke the first layer of black flame ripples, its momentum had already been stopped. The speed of breaking the second layer immediately slowed down. Kill! The flowing star sword roared angrily. Starlight burst out and thunder rumbled. The treasured sword in his hand suddenly bloomed with light, and its power skyrocketed. Break! Break! The second and third layers of black flame ripples were broken in the blink of an eye. After breaking through the 3 layers of black flame ripples, the flowing star sword's sword power weakened from strong to weak, and then it became strong again. Although it didn't take much time, Yi Xing had already left his original position and appeared in a farther place. Bang bang bang, 3 powerful sounds were heard in one breath. In less than half a blink of an eye, another 3 layers of black flame ripples burst out and shot towards the flowing star sword from another direction. The flowing star sword's sword power locked onto Yi Xing's figure. Yi Xing's body moved. He naturally knew that and wanted to continue the chase. However, the 3 layers of black flame ripples burst out and forced the flowing star sword to block them. In this way, the flowing star sword's time was greatly delayed. When the flowing star sword broke through the second 3 layers of black flame ripples, Yi Xing changed his position again. He was already dozens of miles away from the flowing star sword. This time, Yi Xing didn't rush to shoot the black flame ripples. Instead, he pulled the red flame bow fiercely. Yi Xing bent his body and lowered his center of gravity. He exerted all his strength, but still couldn't pull the red flame bow into a full moon. However, Yi Xing could feel the terrifying power contained in the red flame bow. In the blink of an eye, a black flame arrow was formed on the crimson flame bow. Against the flowing star sword, other than the Black Hole constellation and Sagittarius constellation, Yi Xing's other abilities were naturally unleashed to the limit. He continued to use the Dark Wind Fire Arrow incantation to attack the flowing star sword with the strongest arrow. Thunder Flash. The Stellar Stream sword senses were very sensitive. He was a little shaken by the black flame arrow that appeared on the crimson flame bow. He immediately used one of the ultimate moves of the meteor lightning. Rumble. The sound of thunder exploded, and the thunder's celestial manifestation poured down the surging power of thunder. The flowing star sword pierced out, bringing along a resplendent electric light, like a dancing electric snake. Its power was earth-shattering. Whoosh! Yi Xing's pupils constricted. The black flame arrow had already taken shape. Its might had reached the limit as it shot towards the flowing star sword. The black flame arrow and the electric sword aura were both as fast as lightning. In less than half a blink of an eye, they collided. The black aura surged in all directions, and the electric current was like a whip that splashed in all directions. A terrifying blast of air exploded outwards, drowning an area of 10 miles. Whether it was the black flame arrow or the electric sword aura, their power was too terrifying. This huge collision stunned all the martial artists. The blast of air billowed, making it impossible for people to see the scene inside. But what they could see was that Yi Xing had once again drawn the crimson flame bow. In the blink of an eye, another black flame arrow was formed. And in this blink of an eye, the flowing star sword didn't come out of the area where the blast of air billowed. It was obvious that the flowing star sword didn't have the upper hand in the collision just now. Whoosh! The condensed black flame arrow left the bowstring in an instant. The void in front of it was suddenly pierced through, and the surging power caused the blast of air to billow. Although the current situation of the flowing star sword couldn't be seen, the martial artists of the Big Dipper sword sect revealed looks of joy. But the martial artists of the Astral Elephant Palace frowned slightly. Yixing had already shot out his second arrow, but the flowing star sword didn't take the initiative to launch a second attack at Yixing. This was clearly a sign that the flowing star sword was at a disadvantage. Just as the second black flame arrow shot into the area where the blast of air billowed, a dazzling electric light suddenly danced out, and the figure of the flowing star sword appeared. The treasure sword in the flowing star sword's hand carried a dazzling electric light as it ruthlessly attacked the black flame arrow. There was another explosion. Astral light exploded, and the blast of air billowed out in all directions. The flowing star sword's body suddenly shook, and he retreated 100 meters in the air. And in the distance, Yixing's expression was as usual. He drew the crimson flame bow and condensed another black flame arrow. In this current situation, even the martial artists of the younger generation could see that Yixing had the advantage, and the situation wasn't looking good for the flowing star sword. Whoosh! The black flame arrow broke through the air, and with a terrifying power, it once again shot towards the flowing star sword. The flowing star sword was repelled 100 meters back, but his expression was still calm. The arrow shot by Yixing was indeed powerful, but his strength was not bad, and his speed was also fast. Even if he was at a disadvantage, he could still resist. The treasure sword in the flowing star sword's hand bloomed with dazzling electric light. Just as he was about to swing his sword, his expression suddenly changed. He saw that after the black flame arrow was shot out, it suddenly changed direction. The flowing star sword's attention was immediately locked on the black flame arrow, and the treasure sword in his hand also moved according to the direction of the arrow. In the blink of an eye, the black flame arrow changed direction 9 times, and then from a tricky angle, it burst towards the flowing star sword's head. Break! The flowing star sword's reaction was extremely sensitive. The black flame arrow changed direction 9 times, but he still accurately judged the final attack trajectory, and slashed out with his sword. Boom! The terrifying power collided. The black flame arrow was cut in half by the flowing star sword, and turned into black flames that splashed in all directions. It's time to end this. In the distance, Yixing's cold shout came. This time, the flowing star sword's defense against the arrow attack of the 9 changes of the mind lasted the longest time. Yixing pulled the red flame bow and condensed 3 black flame arrows. Whoosh! 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 At the same time as Yixing's voice came, 3 black flame arrows came. The 3 black flame arrows changed direction in the void, and the flowing star sword's face suddenly turned pale. 1 black flame arrow could change direction 9 times and he could still accurately block it. 2 black flame arrows were already very difficult for him, let alone 3 black flame arrows. He had no hope of blocking them at all. It's over. The flowing star sword was greatly frightened. At this moment, the flowing star sword withdrew his sword momentum, and no longer paid attention to any of the black flame arrows. Instead, he performed a defensive sword technique, and his body was impenetrable from all directions. Every time the flowing star sword swung his sword, there was a surge of electric light, and the surging thunderbolt star force fell unceasingly. The flowing star sword condensed the thunderbolt star force into a thunderbolt star ball. Boom! 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 The 3 black flame arrows all hit the thunderbolt star ball, and 3 terrifying explosions sounded at the same time. Chapter 755. The defensive power of the Thunderball was indeed strong. Even a top 2-star king would find it hard to break through. However, the penetrative power of the black flame arrows was also extremely terrifying. The 3 black flame arrows shot into the astral lightning sphere, and then the power contained within them exploded, causing great damage to the astral lightning sphere. Amidst the explosion, the thunderball was riddled with holes and flew backwards. The figure of Flowing Star Sword was revealed and he was in a sorry state. However, the power of the 3 black flame arrows was blocked by the thunderbolt ball in the end, and the Starstream sword was not injured. If it was a normal battle, Flowing Star Sword would have admitted defeat and ended the battle. Unfortunately, this was a battle of life and death. There was no winner or loser. The battle would only end when one side died. Whoosh! Yixing shot out another arrow. The black flame arrow instantly shot a hole in the void and arrived in front of Flowing Star Sword. Flowing Star Sword was hit by the previous 3 black flame arrows and his defense collapsed. How could he block the attack of this black flame arrow? The black flame arrow grew bigger and bigger in Flowing Star Sword's eyes. Flowing Star Sword's expression turned into horror and he shouted, "I admit defeat." At the same time, he forcefully activated the star shield and retreated. After Feng Zhangtian admitted defeat, Yixing spared his life. Flowing Star Sword also admitted defeat now. However, the outcome was different. Yixing did not hesitate and the black flame arrow did not stop as it shot forward. Flowing Star Sword's star shield was destroyed as if it was in vain. The black flame arrow shot directly into Flowing Star Sword's head. Boom! A terrifying power exploded and blew a fist-sized hole in Flowing Star Sword's head. Flowing Star Sword let out a scream and died instantly. His body fell to the ground and blood and brain matter flowed out. This outcome was out of the expectations of many martial artists. They widened their eyes and looked at Flowing Star Sword's corpse in disbelief. Flowing Star Sword was known as the most powerful martial artist in Starry Crescent Land under the age of 35. However, he died in the hands of a master who was not even a martial king. Some martial artists naturally could not accept this outcome. The martial artists from Star Elephant Palace released a terrifying aura and looked furious. Before the battle began, they thought Yixing would definitely die. However, the truth was that Flowing Star Sword was killed by Yixing. He died right in front of their eyes. Yixing kept Flowing Star Sword's upper-grade dark weapon sword and storage ring, carrying Flowing Star Sword's corpse and left the standalone space. After that, Yixing flung Starflow Sword's corpse, throwing it towards the Celestial Elephant Palace martial artist. Flowing Star Sword's corpse fell in front of Star Elephant Palace's team. This action greatly infuriated the martial artists from Star Elephant Palace. They looked at Flowing Star Sword's corpse and then looked at Yixing. Their eyes were about to spit fire. Even in the face of the emperors, great emperors, and quasi-gods from Star Elephant Palace, Yixing did not show any weakness. His sharp gaze swept over them. Yixing said indifferently, "This is the end of arrogant people. One day, I will return to Starry Crescent Land. If Star Elephant Palace does not restrain themselves, Flowing Star Sword will be your example." Among the martial artists from Star Elephant Palace, there were quasi-gods, great emperors, and emperors. All of them were trembling with anger. They glared at Yixing viciously. They could not wait to tear Yixing into pieces. However, Yixing was already first in the competition. He was a genius disciple of the Dark Star Temple. With the 3 divine envoys watching, they would not dare to do anything to Yixing even if they were given 100 guts. After Yixing finished speaking, he returned to the Big Dipper Sword Sect's team. All the martial artists from the Big Dipper Sword Sect gave Yixing a thumbs up. They were very happy. On the black flying ship, Zhong Litao said, "Due to the death of someone, there is a change in the name of the competition this time. There is a vacancy in the top 3 and it will be replaced by the strongest of the 4th, 5th, and 6th places. Then, the strongest of the 7th to 9th places will replace the vacancy in the 4th, 5th, and 6th places. Among the eliminated martial artists, there will be an extra slot. When the total number of people is 10, they will become disciples of the Dark Star Temple. When Zhong Litao said this, the eyes of many martial artists from the younger generation lit up. The 4th, 5th, and 6th place martial artists would have a chance to fight for the top 3. The 7th, 8th, and 9th place martial artists would have a chance to fight for the top 6. The eliminated martial artists would have an extra slot to become disciples of the Dark Star Temple. Due to the death of the Flowing Star Sword, there were suddenly a few more opportunities. Of course, the younger martial artists' spirits were lifted. All of this had nothing to do with Yixing. He returned to the Big Dipper Sword Sect's team and started chatting with the quasi-gods Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue expressed their gratitude to Yixing. Yixing had won first place, so the Big Dipper Sword Sect would receive a generous reward from the Dark Star Temple. Yixing did not say much about this. Instead, he asked about the Dark Star Temple. He was about to set off for the Dark Star Continent and become a disciple of the Dark Star Temple. However, Yixing was very unfamiliar with the Dark Star Continent and the Dark Star Temple. He only knew a little about it from the notes of the founder of the Dark Star Sect, Shuo Hongyuan. Feng Junue had just returned from the Dark Star Temple. Regarding the Dark Star Temple, he explained everything to Yixing in detail. Feng Junue said, the Dark Star Temple is a top-notch 5-star power. Just like how the Big Dipper Sword Sect managed their territory and established the Big Dipper dynasty, the Dark Star Temple also established a political regime known as the Dark Star God Kingdom, ruling over the entire Dark Star continent. However, the difference is that the Big Dipper dynasty is only a vassal of the Big Dipper Sword Sect. On the Dark Star continent, the Dark Star God Kingdom is the dominant force. The Dark Star Temple is only a vassal of the Dark Star God Kingdom. The Dark Star Temple exists to strengthen the rule of the Dark Star God Kingdom. The Dark Star Continent is a high-class continent with countless powerful martial artists. As the strongest sect on the Dark Star Continent, the Dark Star Temple naturally has a large number of disciples. In the Dark Star Temple, anyone below 1,000 years old is a disciple. Above 1,000 years old, quasi-gods are deacons, and true gods are elders. Among the disciples, those below mid-level king level are outer sect disciples. 4-star king level and above are inner sect disciples. Quasi-gods and above are core disciples. Core disciples will be taken in by true gods as personal disciples. True gods, Yixing was excited. He asked, Senior, you're a quasi-god. Are you also a personal disciple of a true god? Feng Junue nodded slightly and said, My master is the 7th elder of the Dark Star Temple, Mo Yuanshan. He's a powerful true god, but... Feng Junue could tell that Yixing was interested in a true god expert. He continued, different personal disciples are different. Like me, I'm just a nominal disciple. My master only saw me once when he took me in as a disciple. After that, he never saw me again. Only very few personal disciples will be noticed by true gods and be specially trained. It's already 5 chapters. Do I still have monthly votes? Just a little more and I'll be in the top 100. Chapter 756. Yixing nodded and said, I see. It's not easy to meet a true god. Feng Junue smiled and said, True gods are the pinnacle of the Dark Star land. They are extremely powerful and rarely show themselves. Of course, it is not easy to meet them. These are too far away. You can enter the Dark Star Godly Palace and become an outer disciple first. Let me tell you more about the outer disciples. There are many disciples in the Dark Star Palace. The outer gate is divided into 10 peaks. There are not only local disciples in the Dark Star continent, but also disciples from other middle-ranked continents. Disciples from middle-ranked continents are recruited once every 100 years. Ordinary middle-ranked continents only take in 10 disciples each time. Powerful middle-ranked continents take in 20. There are more than 100 middle-ranked continents under the Dark Star Palace's jurisdiction. Therefore, Just the number of disciples recruited from the middle continents is more than 1,000. These disciples are all from the 10th peak of the outer sect. The first 9 peaks are all local disciples from the Dark Star continent. They are recruited once every 50 years. Yixing asked, do the other 9 peaks have as many disciples as the 10th peak? Feng Junhua said, of course. High-ranked continents are too vast. There are many 4-star families. Quasi-gods are common. Most of these families send their disciples to the Dark Star Palace to cultivate. Although the other 9 peaks only recruited disciples once every 50 years, each time they recruited a large number of disciples, at least 2,000 or more. However, the Inner Gate disciples are the most numerous. After becoming a 4-star king warrior, they will be promoted to Inner Gate disciples. Every 50 years, there will be more Inner Gate disciples. In total, there are more than 100,000 Inner Gate disciples. Yixing was shocked. The Dark Star Holy Palace was indeed a 5-star force. It was so powerful that the 7 major forces in the Starry Crescent land were like a drop of water compared to it. Feng Junhua continued, the Dark Star Palace is full of powerful warriors and geniuses. Yixing, you have to keep a low profile when you get there. You can tell from the number that the disciples recruited from the middle-ranked continents are less than 1/10 of the total. Don't fight with the local warriors in the Dark Star Palace. They are not alone. Yixing nodded. He was not the type to cause trouble. Feng Junhua said, the first year as an outer disciple is the safest. There will be a quasi-god to guide you in your cultivation. After a year, you will have to rely on yourself. All the resources in the Dark Star Godly Palace can be exchanged with contribution points. Moreover, when you leave the Dark Star Godly Palace, you will need enough contribution points to exchange for them. For contribution points, you will have to venture out and serve the Dark Star Godly Kingdom. While Feng Junhua was explaining, there were other young warriors competing in the arena. Soon, everything was settled. Among the 4th to 6th places, the 3rd junior martial practitioner who had been substituted into the top 3 was Feng Xiaoxiao of the Big Dipper Sword Sect. This was beyond the expectations of the other martial practitioners. No one had expected him to defeat Ping Ju of the Great Spirit Sect. Qiu Yan from the Moon-Splitting Sect was one of the substitutes to make it into the top 6. Among the eliminated cultivators, there were 2 substitutes who entered the top 10. Jin Guangxing was naturally one of them, and the other was Giant Spirit Sect's Lu Xiong. The 10 disciples that the Dark Star Divine Palace would recruit this time were confirmed. The first was Yixing Feng Cangyuan and Feng Xiaoxiao were ranked 2nd and 3rd. Ping Ju, Xiao Yanling, and Qiu Yan were ranked 4th to 6th. Xing Liui, Xian Chuyue, Jin Guangxing, and Lu Xiong were ranked 7th to 10th. There was no doubt that the Big Dipper Sword Sect was the biggest winner. Not only did Yixing occupy the first place, but Feng Xiaoxiao also occupied the top 3 spots. Xiao Yanling was also ranked 4th to 6th. The 3 divine messengers quickly distributed the rewards to the quasi-gods of the 7 major sects according to their rankings. As the representative of the Big Dipper Sword Sect, Feng Hanqiu received the rewards. He was so happy that he could not stop smiling. All right, junior brothers and sisters who have become disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace, it's time for us to return. Come on up. Zhong Litao stood at the bow of the black spaceship and announced loudly after the rewards were distributed. Yixing, Feng Xiaoxiao, and Xiao Yanling bid farewell to the Big Dipper Sword Sect's martial practitioners. Yixing was not from the Starry Crescent land. He was very happy that he had a chance to return to the Starry Crescent land if he went to the Dark Star Divine Palace. As for Feng Xiaoxiao and Xiao Yanling, they were both happy and reluctant to leave their hometowns. They bid farewell to the people close to them. The 3 divine messengers also knew that the martial practitioners were sad about leaving home, so they did not rush them. After a while, the 10 of them boarded the black spaceship. Zhong Litao stood on the deck and looked at the 10 young martial practitioners. He said, "On the path of martial arts, there should not be too many obstacles. You can only go further in the Dark Star Divine Palace if you can't let go. If you can't, you won't have the heart to cultivate at the Dark Star Divine Palace. You might as well not go now." "I can let go," the young martial practitioners said. It was not easy for them to stand out among their peers and obtain the opportunity to become a disciple of the Dark Star Divine Palace. They were looking forward to it. How could they not go? Zhong Litao opened the cabin and said, "That's good. Let's go. The Void Crossing Divine Ship will take some time to pass through the Void Passage between the Starry Crescent Land. Once we pass through the Void Passage, we will arrive at the Dark Star Divine Palace." Yi Xing and the others entered the cabin. Zhong Litao, Fan Wengang, and Situ Hai also entered, but they went to other rooms. The cabin quickly closed. There were transparent oars on both sides of the cabin that allowed them to see outside. They could see that the Void Crossing Divine Ship had already started moving. The Void Crossing Divine Ship's speed went from slow to fast. Soon, it reached the speed of breaking through the Void Passage. It traveled through the Void Passage. Every time it passed through a Void Passage, Yi Xing realized that the scenery outside was different. He did not know how far it had traveled. Not long after, the Void Crossing Divine Ship was surrounded by Void Passage cracks. It was obvious that they had reached the depths of the chaotic desert. These Void Passage cracks were troublesome even for quasi-gods. The Void Crossing Divine Ship did not slow down. It continued to barge through the Void Passage cracks. It could travel through the Void Passage, so it was not afraid of being damaged by the Void Passage cracks. After a short while, they could no longer see anything outside the cabin. There were only Void Passage cracks. It was obvious that the Void Crossing Divine Ship had entered the Void Passage. Now, they had probably left the Starry Crescent Land. Feng Xiaoxiao sat beside Yi Xing. The two of them retracted their gazes from outside the cabin. They looked at each other and smiled. The two of them had once said that they would one day travel to a high-tier continent. They did not expect this wish to come true so quickly. Moreover, not only did they reach a high-tier continent, but they would also become disciples of the 5-star force, the Dark Star Divine Palace. Thinking about it made them feel excited. In the cabin, most of the ancient martial art practitioners looked curiously at the Void Passage outside. Xing Liui, the disciple of the Celestial Elephant Palace, glanced at Yi Xing and Feng Xiaoxiao from time to time. His eyes were filled with viciousness. 6:00. Double the last bit of time, begging for monthly votes. Chapter 759. Yi Xing took a few steps forward and asked, "Senior brother, what can I do for you?" The 2-star Peak King glanced at Yi Xing and saw that he was just a 9th-star Venerable Lord. He frowned and said, "Someone who can speak." Yi Xing said indifferently, "I can speak." There was clearly a 2-star king on the other side, but it seemed like this 9th-star Venerable Lord was the leader. The 2-star Peak King was surprised. He sized up Yi Xing again and asked, "Which continent are you from?" Yi Xing asked, "We are from the Starry Crescent continent." "Which continent are you from?" The 2-star Peak King raised his eyebrows and said, "This king is Lu Fengyun from the Starcloud continent. My elder brother is the #1 junior genius of the Starcloud continent, Lu Li." Starcloud continent, Yi Xing's heart moved. Among the hundreds of continents that the Dark Star Temple recruited disciples from, there were a few that were the strongest. The Starcloud continent was one of them, and they had a 6th-level Star Nirvana Realm quasi-god expert. Lu Fengyun's gaze swept over Yi Xing and the others with a smug look. Among the hundreds of continents, the Starcloud continent was one of the top continents. They had a strong sense of superiority towards disciples from other continents. Lu Fengyun continued, I believe you have heard of the Starcloud continent from your elders. Our Starcloud continent's disciples are mostly quasi-gods who were accepted as personal disciples by the temple's true god experts. From now on, your Starcloud continent's disciples will follow our Starcloud continent's disciples. My elder brother, Luli, will be one of the overlords of the outer court. You have to listen to his orders, understand? Yixing and the others understood that the other party was here to recruit subordinates. Yixing chuckled and said, "Sorry, I only listen to the Dark Star Temple's orders." Lu Fengyun said, "Obeying the orders of the Dark Star Temple is a must. Apart from that, you must obey my brother Lu Li's orders. Otherwise, without the protection of my Starcloud continent, you will have a hard time in the outer gate, being bullied by others." Yixing shook his head and said, "Please go back. Other than the Dark Star Divine Palace, I will not listen to anyone else's orders." Lu Fengyun's expression turned furious as he shouted, "You dare to refuse? Do you know what the consequences are?" Yixing smiled faintly, too lazy to bother with him. Lu Fengyun's enraged gaze swept across the crowd as he said in a cold voice, "All of you, don't even put the disciples of my Starcloud continent in your eyes." Feng Tsangtian, Xing Liuyi, and the others froze. They were all geniuses in the Starry Crescent land and had a bunch of followers. How could they be willing to be someone's follower? This was the Dark Star Divine Palace, not the Starry Crescent land. In the Starry Crescent land, they were geniuses, but here, they were just ordinary outer disciples. Every 100 years in the Starry Crescent land, there would be 10 martial artists who would become disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace. Naturally, the situation of the outer sect would be passed down from generation to generation. The new disciples would know that there was a rule of forming cliques in the outer sect. The disciples of the 10th peak came from more than 100 middle continents. The competition between the disciples of different middle continents was fierce and no one was willing to submit to anyone. At this time, the one with the bigger fist would be the boss. Those who could stand at the top of the outer sect were the disciples of the most powerful middle continents. The disciples of the other middle continents would be ostracized by them and faced with two choices. The first choice was to become a follower of one of the strongest middle continents and listen to their orders. They would become their follower and become a force to compete with the other middle continent's disciples. The second choice was to refuse the other party's recruitment and be independent. However, they would be suppressed by the strongest middle continent's disciples and be controlled at every step in the outer sect. However, this was the Dark Star Divine Palace after all. The disciples could fight and quarrel, but they would not dare to be too obvious and kill anyone. Therefore, although it was difficult to be controlled at every step, they would not lose their lives because of it. The first choice was to live a more comfortable life and become someone's follower. The second choice was to live a more difficult life, but have their own freedom and personality. Yixing was obviously the second choice. He would not become anyone's follower. Everyone's thoughts were different. Yixing chose the second choice, but it did not mean that others would do the same. Furthermore, the others did not have Yixing's strength and naturally did not have Yixing's confidence. It was normal for them to waver. Under Lu Fengyun's cold gaze, Feng Tsangtian and Xing Liuyi took the lead and stepped forward. They cupped their fists and said, "We are willing to follow senior brother Lu Li." Star Elephant Palace, Demon Ceiling Valley and Dark Moon Palace, the three major sects were united. Xian Chuyue saw Feng Tsangtian and Xing Liuyi's attitude and also stepped forward. She said, "I am willing to follow senior brother Lu Li." Lu Fengyun saw that a two-star king had been successfully recruited and was in a good mood. Xian Chuyue was as beautiful as a flower and also bowed her head to Star Cloud Continent. This made him even happier and a smile appeared on his face. However, his expression turned cold again. He looked at the others and said, "Have you all made your decision? I'll give you one last chance. Otherwise, hee. I'll beat you up every time I see you." Feng Xiaoxiao and Zhao Yanling stood beside Yixing. Feng Xiaoxiao was a strong person and would not become someone's follower. Zhao Yanling naturally followed Yixing and Feng Xiaoxiao's opinions. As for Qiu Yan, Jin Guangxing, Ping Ju and Lu Xiong, their expressions were ugly. They did not know how to choose. If they really wanted to, they would not want to become someone's follower. However, they were afraid that they could not bear the consequences of rejecting. After some hesitation, Jin Guangxing walked over to Lu Fengyun and said, "I am willing to follow senior brother Lu Li." After some thought, Jin Guangxing still chose to bow his head to Star Cloud Continent. Senior brother Peng. Lu Xiong looked at Ping Ju. Ping Ju looked at Lu Fengyun and then looked at Yixing. He made a decision and said, "I will only follow senior brother Yixing." Although he had lost to Yixing, he was extremely impressed with Yixing's strength. He believed that Yixing would achieve great things in the future. Furthermore, Yixing had Feng Xiaoxiao by his side. In Ping Ju's opinion, it was better to follow Yixing than to follow the geniuses of other continents. "I am also willing to follow senior brother Yixing." Lu Xiong saw the situation and naturally joined Ping Ju. "I am also willing to follow senior brother Yixing." Qiu Yan also made a decision. Being a follower of a genius from another continent did not have any status. It was better to follow Yixing. Lu Fengyun's eyes narrowed and emitted a cold light. He swept his gaze across everyone and finally locked onto Yixing. Lu Fengyun said coldly, "Fine. I will let you know the consequences of rejecting the Star Cloud Continent." Yixing's eyes also sharpened as he said, "We will mind our own business. If you don't offend me, I won't offend you. If you offend me, I will pay you back double." Chapter 760. Lu Fengyun's face darkened as he released a terrifying aura. He stared at Yixing fiercely as though he would attack Yixing at any moment. Yixing looked indifferent and did not take Lu Fengyun's aura seriously. Today was the registration day, the first day of the new disciples. Even if Lu Fengyun was given 1,000 guts, he would not dare to attack him here. Even though the elders of the Dark Star Divine Palace had always turned a blind eye to the fights between the disciples, it was still intolerable that a fight broke out on the first day of a new disciple's recruitment. Moreover, even if Lu Fengyun really attacked, Yixing was not afraid at all. Facing Lu Fengyun's anger, he was naturally calm. Seeing that Yixing was not frightened, Lu Fengyun retracted his aura and laughed coldly. "You are Yixing, right? I will remember you. Be careful in the future, hee hee." With that, Lu Fengyun flung his robes and left. Yixing did not say his name. Lu Fengyun knew his name because one of Feng Zhangtian, Xing Liui, Xian Chuyue, and Jin Guangxing had secretly sent a message to Lu Fengyun. Yixing's gaze swept across Feng Zhangtian and the other three. The four of them looked unnatural as they hurriedly turned around and entered their own rooms. "Senior brother Yixing, what should we do?" Zhao Yanling looked at Yixing and her voice was a little nervous. Yixing's strength was not the best among the outer disciples, but his speed was definitely the best. Even if he could not win, he could still run away. He was not worried that the disciples of Star Cloud Continent would bully him. However, Feng Xiaoxiao and the others were not as strong as him and were not as fast as him. This was a troublesome matter. Since they all saw Yixing as their backbone, Yixing naturally had to consider them. Yixing thought for a while and said, "In the future, all of you should stay in your rooms and cultivate. Try not to go out. The star Yuan Qi here is very abundant and suitable for cultivation. When I become one of the overlords of the outer sect, all of you will be able to roam freely in the outer sect." Everyone nodded and returned to their rooms. The next day, early in the morning, the speed communication beads of all the outer disciples on Ming Peak lit up. The Peak Master's order: all outer sect disciples are to gather at the square at the foot of the mountain. On the 10th summit, all the outer sect disciples walked out of their rooms and left the courtyard. They rose into the air and landed on the square at the foot of the mountain. Yixing looked around and realized that the number of outer disciples on Dark Peak was not far from 2,000. Among them, 90% were low-level Astral Sea Realm Kings, and 10% were high-level Astral Star Realm Supremacy Lords. In terms of cultivation base, apart from Feng Xiaoxiao who was an 8th-star Supremacy, Yixing who was a 9th-star Supremacy was at the bottom. High Lords and Kings were simply too fast. In just a few dozen breaths of time, all of the disciples had already arrived at the square. Moreover, under the guidance of the deacon, they had already lined up. All the disciples were wearing the sect uniform that they had received yesterday. They looked neat and uniform. 3 middle-aged men arrived in the air and stood in front of all the disciples. Yixing could not sense any fluctuations of astral power from them. It was obvious that their cultivation base was far inferior. The 3 of them were all-star Nirvana quasi-gods. An outer sect deacon immediately shouted, "Greetings, Peak Master Mo Qingyang, Elder Wu Mingtong, and Elder Zhao Yuan." The 10th summit of the outer sect had 3 quasi-gods. Peak Master Mo Qingyang was a 5th Nirvana quasi-god, outer sect Elder Wu Mingtong was a 4th Nirvana quasi-god, and outer sect Elder Zhao Yuan was a 3rd Nirvana quasi-god. The outer sect disciples immediately showed respect on their faces. They cupped their fists and bowed in unison. In the Dark Star Divine Palace, quasi-gods below 1,000 years old were core disciples. After 1,000 years old, they would still maintain a master-disciple relationship with true God experts. However, their status would be higher and they would become elders. Among them, 1st Nirvana and 2nd Nirvana quasi-gods would become inner sect deacons. 3rd Nirvana and 4th Nirvana quasi-gods would become outer sect elders. 5th Nirvana and 6th Nirvana quasi-gods would become outer sect peak masters or rank 1 divine officials of the divine nation. As for quasi-god experts above 7th Nirvana, they were no different from true God experts. They would become inner sect elders of the Dark Star Divine Palace. In the sky, Missouri Qingyang, the peak master of the 10th summit of the outer sect, waved his hand. An invisible force was transmitted. The 1,000 or so disciples felt it at the same time and involuntarily stood up straight. Mo Qingyang said, "Juniors, welcome to the Dark Star Divine Palace." The Dark Star Divine Palace is a top 5-star force and one of the 3 strongest forces of the flowing light boundary. Martial artists from intermediate continents only have the opportunity to become disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace once in 100 years. It is your fortune, your honor, and your opportunity to become a disciple of the Dark Star Divine Palace. I hope that you will seize this opportunity and cultivate diligently in the Dark Star Divine Palace. Mo Qingyang gave a long opening speech. In the martial pavilion of this summit, there are black-level medium-grade and upper-grade cultivation techniques and martial skills. You can choose any one of them to cultivate. You are limited to one. On the first day of every month, Elder Zhao Yuan will explain the cultivation techniques to you. On the second day, Elder Wu Mingtong will explain the cultivation techniques to you. If you have any questions, you can ask them. In your rooms, there's an energy gathering array. The astral yuan qi here is much denser compared to the outside world, and is suitable for cultivation. Secondly, at the peak of this mountain, there's also a cultivation pagoda with a total of 3 levels. In the cultivation pagoda, the speed of cultivation is faster, and the higher the level, the denser the astral yuan qi would be. The disciples immediately became spirited. This was related to the speed of their cultivation. This was what they were most interested in. Mo Qingyang continued, "There are many of you, and the space in the cultivation pagoda is limited. Therefore, only the most outstanding disciples can cultivate in the cultivation pagoda. This God will divide the outstanding disciples into 3 levels. The first level can cultivate in the 3rd floor of the cultivation pagoda. The second level can cultivate in the second floor of the cultivation pagoda. The third level can cultivate in the first floor of the cultivation pagoda. In the first level, there are 8 disciples with peak 3-star king battle strength. They are Tu Qianzhang, Xing Haoyu, Sun Gang, Lu Li, Yu Feifei, Gao Jian, and Zhen Zihan. Yi Xing, Feng Xiaoxiao, and the others' hearts tightened when they heard Imo Qingyang's words. They had heard Lu Li's name. Yesterday, Lu Fongyun, who had come to the 71st courtyard, had said that his brother, Lu Li, was the #1 genius of the younger generation of the Starcloud continent. It seemed like he wasn't bragging. He was not even 35 years old and already had the strength of a peak 3-star king. It was very likely that he was that peak 3-star king. He was not simple. Mo Qingyang's voice continued. In the second level, there are 26 disciples with the strength of an ordinary 3-star king. They are Ming Chodie, Zhen Dongyue, Mo Tianhao. In the third level, there are 87 disciples with the strength of a peak 2-star king. They are Tu Wanqing, Lu Fongyun, Yi Xing. Yi Xing heard his name in the list of the third level. Chapter 761. Cultivating in the cultivation pagoda was obviously much faster than cultivating in a room. Yi Xing had obtained the qualification to cultivate in the cultivation tower in the third level, so he was in a very good mood. There were close to 2,000 disciples in the 10th peak, but only a little more than 100 could enter the cultivation tower, which was less than 10%. The disciples in the third level were all very happy, while the rest of the disciples were only envious. After reading the list, Mo Qingyang continued, among the 10 peaks, there is a enlightenment peak. There, you can comprehend martial arts and the power of heaven and earth with half the effort. Every peak's disciple has a chance to comprehend the Tao there. According to the sect rules, the cultivation methods and martial arts in the martial pavilion, as well as cultivating in the cultivation pagoda and comprehending the Tao at Enlightenment Peak, all require sect contribution points to exchange for them. However, for new disciples in their first year, they will be available to you for free. I hope you will manage your time appropriately and use the resources reasonably. Enlightenment Peak. Yi Xing's heart skipped a beat. In the outer sect of the Dark Star Godly Palace, Yi Xing was looking forward to the Enlightenment Peak the most. His one with arrow had already reached the third level, and the next step was to comprehend the arrow intent. However, comprehending any kind of martial intent was extremely difficult. Even though Yi Xing's perception was extremely high, it was still extremely difficult. However, if he were to comprehend it in the Enlightenment Peak, the difficulty would be greatly reduced. Yi Xing was confident that he could comprehend the arrow intent within a year. I'll go to the Enlightenment Peak first. After comprehending the arrow intent, I'll go to the cultivation tower. Yi Xing instantly made a decision. The contribution points required to enter the Enlightenment Peak were much higher than the cultivation tower. Moreover, Yi Xing was confident that he could comprehend the arrow intent within a year in the Enlightenment Peak. However, in the cultivation tower, even at the highest level, Yi Xing wasn't confident that he could break through the Star Sea realm and become a King Realm warrior within a year. After weighing the two options, Yi Xing naturally had to do what he was confident of. As long as he could comprehend the arrow intent, his strength would increase greatly. However, no matter how hard he tried to consolidate his cultivation base at the 9th level of the astral reaching realm, it would be hard for him to make any progress without breaking through to the King Realm. 1 year after a new disciple entered the sect, each peak would hold a competition, and this competition would determine whether or not Yi Xing could return to the Star Continent. To him, increasing his strength was extremely important. Mo Qingyang continued, your seniors have all entered the Dark Star Divine Palace before. I'm sure they've already told you about the new disciples after they join the sect. Every peak will have a competition once a year after the new disciples join the sect. The top 10 will be qualified to enter the Heavenly Bao continent. As long as you explore the Heavenly Bao continent, you'll be rewarded with contribution points regardless of what you gain. Yixing took a deep breath. The Heavenly Bow continent was the key to his return to the star mainland. 2,000 years ago, Shuohongyuan was also an outer court disciple of the Dark Star God Palace. However, he was a martial artist from the Dark Star mainland, a disciple of the Seventh Peak. Although he was only a 2-star King Realm martial artist, he had the battle prowess of a 4-star King Realm martial artist. In the competition held a year after the new disciples had joined the Dark Star mainland, he had entered the top 10 of the Seventh Peak and entered the Heavenly Bow mainland to explore. In the end, Shuohongyuan fell into a space crack in the Heavenly Bow mainland and accidentally arrived at the Star mainland. In the notes that Shuohongyuan left behind in the Dark Star sect, it recorded the process of him arriving at the Star mainland in detail. As long as Yixing arrived at the Heavenly Bow mainland, he would be able to follow the route that Shuohongyuan had taken and head to the Star mainland. Mo Qingyang said, "The Heavenly Bow mainland is the burial ground of Luo Tiangong, a true god expert from 20,000 years ago." Luo Tiangong was a rogue martial artist who specialized in archery. When he was alive, he was extremely powerful. He was the king of rogue martial artists in the Flowing Light Boundary. After the Heavenly Bow true god passed away, he buried himself in an extraterritorial starland and laid down layers of formations. Martial artists who were beginner King Realm martial artists and above couldn't enter. Even a true god was no exception. If a true god attacked forcefully, the formations would collapse, and the entire Heavenly Bow mainland would be destroyed. Therefore, in order to obtain the treasures left behind by the Heavenly Bow true god, only beginner King Realm martial artists could enter the Heavenly Bow mainland to explore. You can imagine the treasures in the burial ground of a true god expert. Supreme grade dark weapons are all trash in there. If you have the opportunity, it won't be difficult to find a divine weapon. Gasps could be heard from below. The hearts of the disciples started to beat faster, and their breaths became heavier. Divine weapon, to a King Realm martial artist, a divine weapon was a priceless treasure. Although a King Realm martial artist couldn't wield the power of a divine weapon, he would definitely be able to obtain a huge amount of contribution points if he handed the divine weapon to the Dark Star Temple. When the time came, they would be able to compete for treasures that were suitable for them. Naturally, they would be able to exchange for whatever they wanted. Even though Yixing had a strong mental state, his heart couldn't help but beat faster. A true god expert who cultivated archery would definitely have an inheritance of archery. If he could obtain it, it would naturally be an immeasurable gain for Yixing. It would be crucial for his future. Mo Qingyang paused for a moment. Looking at the expectant expressions of the disciples below, he revealed a satisfied expression. He smiled and continued, "Only those who enter the top 10 in the competition 1 year later will be qualified to enter the Heavenly Bow mainland. This year, it will depend on your hard work." Top 10. Most of the disciples revealed expressions of despair. It was too difficult to enter the top 10 among nearly 2,000 disciples. Aside from the 8 people in the first tier, no one dared to guarantee that they would be able to enter the top 10. Aside from Yixing, only the disciples in the second tier were excited. There were only 8 people in the first tier, and there were still 2 spots in the top 10. This was their hope. Furthermore, there was still 1 year before the competition. Although it was difficult to make any progress in the King Realm in 1 year, and it was difficult for one's strength to increase significantly, as long as one cultivated diligently, there was still hope for one's strength to increase greatly if one made a breakthrough in one's cultivation or one's comprehension of the martial Tao or the power of the world. Hence, many of the disciples in the second tier were filled with fighting spirit for the competition 1 year later. After Mo Qingyang finished speaking, the 2 quasi-god elders, Wu Mingtong and Zhao Yuan, also spoke, saying some encouraging words for the new disciples. Then Mo Qingyang ordered the outer sect deacon to set up a stone stele at the edge of the plaza and engrave the names of the cultivators in the 3 tiers on it. At this point, the peak master's summons ended. The 3 quasi-gods left, and the remaining time was up to the disciples. Some of the disciples returned to their houses, while others could not wait to head to the cultivation pagoda. Most of the disciples gathered around the stone stele at the edge of the plaza, discussing the names of the disciples who had left their names on the stone stele. Feng Xiaoxiao, Xiao Yanling, and the others returned to their houses. Yixing left some instructions for them and left the 10th peak, heading for Enlightenment Peak. Most of the cultivators in the 3 tiers went to the cultivation pagoda to cultivate first. Yixing was an exception. Yixing had just left the 10th peak when he was stopped by someone. Hee. Lu Fengyun was in front, looking at Yixing and laughing. I'm sorry, but I've been having a memory lapse recently. Coincidentally, I returned to my hometown and could not integrate into the world of books. This is the first time I've been off for such a long time. However, every day, there are still brothers voting for me. This makes me feel ashamed. Thank you. Thank you, brothers, for your support. I will definitely make up for the updates in these few days. Chapter 763. The moment the arrow was shot out, the void shattered and a hole was formed. The flaming snake sword aura was completely penetrated by the black flame arrow. In less than half a blink of an eye, the arrow had already arrived before Lu Fengyun. Lu Fengyun's heart shook. What a terrifying arrow! It actually made him instinctively feel fear. As a 2-star peak king, although the arrow was fast, it didn't exceed his reaction time. The upper-grade mystic weapon sword glowed brightly and instantly flashed. Bang! The sword collided with the arrow and let out a loud explosion. The black flame arrow was cut in half, but the power contained within the arrow caused Lu Fengyun's hands to tremble. The upper-grade mystic weapon sword buzzed. And Lu Fengyun's body was pushed back by the force of the arrow. In the distance, Yixing's figure retreated again and pulled back the crimson flame bow. He circulated the dark wind fire arrow incantation and the black flame arrow continued to form. When Lu Fengyun dissipated the power in his body and stabilized his body, he no longer retreated. With a loud explosion, the black flame arrow left the bowstring and shot towards him. Lu Fengyun's eyes narrowed as he witnessed the power of the black flame arrow. His expression was extremely grim as he concentrated his mental energy like never before. He circulated the astral energy in his body to the limit and was about to explode with a powerful attack to block this arrow. When the arrow left the bowstring, Lu Fengyun had already determined its trajectory. The upper-grade mystic weapon sword in his hand bloomed with resplendent flames as he prepared to shatter the black flame arrow with a single slash. However, the instant Lu Fengyun made his decision, the black flame arrow suddenly changed its direction. Whoosh! 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 The black flame arrow flickered like a stream of light and changed direction 9 times in an instant. Although the attack was fast, Lu Fengyun could still react in time. However, when it changed direction 9 times in an instant, Lu Fengyun's reaction couldn't keep up with the changes. The instant the black flame arrow was in front of him, Lu Fengyun's heart tightened. He slashed down with the sword in his hand, but it was too slow. Bang! The black flame arrow hit Lu Fengyun's body and let out a loud bang. Lu Fengyun let out a blood-curdling scream as his body was like a cannonball and was sent flying 1,000 meters away. He had a black-grade upper-level inner armor to protect his body, so the black flame arrows did not penetrate it. However, the sharp arrows penetrated the inner armor and entered his body, causing considerable damage to Lu Fengyun's internal organs. Puff! Lu Fengyun's body retreated and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale. Lu Fengyun landed on a small hill a few miles away. Yixing took a step forward and executed the Art of the 9 Heavens astral travel. His body was like a stream of light as he flew into the sky. Yixing's wind yuan qi circled around his feet as he stood in the air. He looked down at Lu Fengyun and said, now it seems that the stupid one is you. Yixing withdrew his gaze and flashed across the sky, continuing to Enlightenment Mountain. On the ground, Lu Fengyun stood up and spat out a mouthful of blood. Looking at the direction where Yixing disappeared, he clenched his fists and his eyes were full of resentment. Yixing! You wait for me. Lu Fengyun gnashed his teeth, his voice jumping out from between his teeth. Yixing soon arrived at Enlightenment Mountain. Yixing registered his identity card with the deacon guarding Enlightenment Mountain and ascended the mountain. Enlightenment Mountain was an important place in the outer sect. Fighting was prohibited inside. Comprehending arrow essence was not something that could be accomplished overnight. Yixing was prepared to stay at Enlightenment Mountain for a long time. He didn't care if Lu Fengyun would seek revenge from his brother. Moreover, even if he wasn't at Enlightenment Mountain, Yixing wasn't afraid of Lu Li. His speed was unparalleled. Among the outer sect disciples, there were very few who could do anything to him. As for Feng Xiaoxiao and the others, they had been cultivating in their rooms for the past few days. Even if Lu Fengyun wanted to cause trouble for them, he could not do anything about it. Yixing naturally had nothing to worry about. He could throw everything to the back of his mind and focus on comprehending the way of archery at Enlightenment Mountain. Enlightenment Mountain was the first peak of the outer sect. It was taller than the 10 main peaks of the outer sect. The mountain was tens of thousands of feet high and stretched for dozens of miles. In the mountain, there were smooth stone walls. The stone walls contained all kinds of great Tao of heaven and earth. Sword Tao, knife Tao, spear Tao, arrow Tao, all kinds of martial arts. Wind, fire, thunder, water, earth, wood, all kinds of great Tao of heaven and earth could be found on Enlightenment Mountain. So many great Tao gathered on a mountain peak. Of course, it wasn't formed naturally. Enlightenment Mountain was majestic and beautiful. Being in the mountain could calm one's mind. It was indeed helpful in comprehending Tao. However, the many traces of great Tao on Enlightenment Mountain were left behind by generations of experts from the Dark Star Divine Palace. To be able to leave behind traces of great Tao for others to comprehend, one had to at least have a true meaning of the Tao or martial will that had reached perfection. Such a powerhouse, even among true God powerhouses, was an extremely powerful existence, standing at the pinnacle. As a 5-star sect, the Dark Star Divine Palace had very few true God experts. However, the Dark Star Divine Palace had a long history. After countless years of accumulation, there were naturally many experts. The lifespan of a true divinity powerhouse was 30,000 years. As time passed, generation after generation of true divinity powerhouses had already turned to dust. But they had still managed to imprint their comprehensions onto the stone walls of Enlightenment Peak for future generations to comprehend. Therefore, Enlightenment Mountain wasn't just for outer sect disciples to comprehend. Even inner sect disciples could benefit from Enlightenment Mountain. On the mountain path, there were stone tablets to guide the way. They pointed out the places that were suitable for comprehending Tao. Yixing chose the path for comprehending arrow essence. After walking for dozens of miles, he arrived at the mountainside of Enlightenment Mountain. A smooth stone wall about 100 meters wide appeared in front of Yixing's eyes. In front of the stone wall, there were already a few disciples comprehending. Yixing observed for a while and then observed the terrain before leaving. On the opposite side of the stone wall, there was a side peak a few miles away. It didn't take long for him to arrive at this side peak. Arrow essence required a certain distance to unleash its full power. Yixing stood at the foot of the stone wall and knew that it was not the best place to meditate because it was too close to the stone wall. The side peak a few miles away was the most suitable place to face the stone wall from afar. Yixing wasn't the only one with such foresight. There was already someone on this side peak. It was a black-robed youth who looked to be about 18 or 19 years old. The black-robed youth's aura was concealed, but Yixing's super brain scanned him and easily found out his cultivation base. He was a 2-star king. Obviously, he was an outer sect disciple who had just entered the sect. Yixing had a feeling that this wasn't a disciple of the 10th peak, but a local of the Dark Star continent. He was a disciple of one of the other 9 peaks. Seeing someone approaching, the black-robed youth turned to look at Yixing. When he saw that Yixing was just a 9th star venerable lord, he was slightly surprised. Chapter 765. Among the 10 peaks, the first peak had always been the strongest. Xuezi's strength was probably extremely powerful even among 4-star kings since she was ranked first among the first peak's disciples. Yixing opened his eyes. Just now, he had heard the words first peak, first layer, and Xuezi from the surrounding disciples' whispers. He knew that this purple-robed youth was an extremely powerful figure among the outer disciples. However, this was Enlightenment Mountain, where fighting was forbidden. Strength was useless here. Yixing's gaze indifferently swept over Xuezi and said, "Where did this bastard come from?" Scram! The disciples who knew Xuezi's identity immediately opened their eyes wide in shock. This was Xuezi. His strength was at the peak among the outer disciples. Among the 10,000 outer disciples, less than 1 in 100 could contend against him. Knowing Xuezi's identity, who would dare to not give her face? A mere 9th star venerable lord actually dared to call him a bastard in front of him and tell him to scram. This was out of the disciples' expectations, so they were naturally shocked. Xuezi's expression froze. His strength was enough to sweep through the majority of 4-star kings. A 9th star venerable lord was indeed no different from an ant in his eyes. When he told a 9th star venerable lord to scram, no one had ever dared to refuse. Who would have thought that he would run into a snag in front of Yixing? He definitely doesn't know who I am. Xuezi thought. Even so, Xuezi was still furious. He coldly snorted and said, "A 9th astral reaching realm cultivation base can become a disciple of the Dark Star Divine Palace. You must be an ant from a middle continent who hasn't seen the world. Do you know who I am?" Xuezi raised his head, and his arrogance became even more obvious as he continued, "I am Xuezi. I come from the 5-star family Xue family. My family's ancestor is an inner elder of the Divine Palace, a true god expert. My strength is also outstanding among the disciples of the first peak. Few can contend against me. You, a mere 9th star venerable lord, an ant-like thing, dares to speak like this in front of me, Xuezi? How dare you? Get out of my way." Yixing frowned slightly. The other party's background was really quite big. However, what made Yixing apprehensive wasn't how powerful Xuezi was, but his family background. A 5-star family with a true god expert was too powerful. In an instant, thousands of thoughts flashed through Yixing's mind. Then, he smiled and the fear in his heart disappeared without a trace. A 5-star family was indeed powerful, and Yixing had absolutely no way of contending against them. However, it was precisely because of the size of a 5-star family that Yixing concluded that Xuezi was just an insignificant figure in the Xue family. Perhaps his talent was somewhat outstanding and he could become a quasi-god in the future. However, the number of quasi-god realm disciples from 5-star clans was definitely not small. Xuezi was just a junior. It would be difficult for her to utilize the power of a 5-star family. As for a true god expert, it was impossible for them to interfere because of some conflicts between juniors. Otherwise, which of the Xue family's disciples wouldn't be able to do anything else for the rest of their lives if a true god expert was in charge of them? If he killed Xuezi, there would definitely be big trouble. However, if he only had a conflict with Xuezi, their conflict would be limited to the two of them and would not involve the Xue family. In that case, Yixing had nothing to fear. Yixing only planned to stay in the outer sect of the Dark Star Temple for a year. After a year, he would head to the Heavenly Bow continent and return to the Star continent. When he returned to the Dark Star continent from the Star continent to the Starry Crescent land, he would at least be a second Nirvana quasi-god. At that time, a mere Shuezi would be nothing. Yixing shouted, "Bastard, get out of my way." Shuezi's eyes widened. He didn't expect that even after he reported his name and origin, he still couldn't suppress this Ninth Star Venerable Lord. This king. Shuezi had just opened his mouth when Yixing interrupted him coldly, "Say no more. I know you're Shuezi and you're a genius disciple of the First Peak. However, what does that have to do with me? Do you think that you can make the Temple Master change the rules of Enlightenment Peak? Do you think that you can snatch other people's positions in Enlightenment Peak? If you think you can, go ahead and tell the Temple Master. If you don't have the ability, then get out of my way. Don't embarrass yourself here." Shuezi's chest heaved up and down. He had nowhere to vent his anger. He glared fiercely at Yixing and shouted, "Fine. You win, but this king warns you, you'd better stay in Enlightenment Peak. Don't fall into my hands in the future." Yixing smiled and said, "Are you done? If you're done, then get out of my way. Don't disturb my enlightenment." Shuezi snorted and glanced at the surrounding disciples. He felt his face burning. He clenched his teeth and walked away. After 100 meters, he suddenly stopped. "You'll pay for what you did today. You definitely will." Shuezi left behind these words before her figure flashed and quickly vanished from everyone's field of vision. Even though he had come here to comprehend the Tao of archery, he was too ashamed to stay here for the time being after such a thing had happened. After Shuezi left, Zhuofifen gave Yixing a thumbs up and said, "Junior brother Yi, you're so magnanimous." Yixing smiled and said, "I've gotten myself into big trouble." Zhuofifen nodded and said, "In the first year, he can't go to the 10th peak to deal with you. Moreover, after a year, as long as you're in the Dark Star Divine Palace, he won't dare to do anything to you. The key is that when you leave the Divine Palace, you must be careful to hide your whereabouts. Don't let him know." Yixing said, "Thank you for your reminder, Senior Brother Zhua." After the incident with Shuezi, Yixing didn't encounter anyone else who wanted to take his place. He had been meditating quietly. Yixing studied the Jade Arms Tao of archery, and gained some enlightenment. Then, he closed his eyes and meditated, transforming it into his own. He repeated this process repeatedly, and his understanding of the Tao of archery continued to rise. Time flew by, month after month. After more than half a year, Yixing's understanding of archery had already reached the limit of one with the arrow. On this day, he finally had a breakthrough. On the bluestone, Yixing's chi suddenly became violent and incomparably sharp. The astral energy in Yixing's body was changing. It changed from strands to the shape of arrows. The astral energy in his body seemed to be made up of countless tiny arrows, and had the terrifying penetrating power of arrows. Although Yixing's cultivation was still at the 9th level of astral reaching realm, and the strength of his astral energy hadn't changed, the penetrating power of his astral energy had increased by more than 10 times. There was only one reason for the change of his astral energy, and that was the arrow intent. Once the arrow intent was formed, Yixing's understanding of archery had reached a new level. There were hundreds of places around his body that he couldn't shoot. Chapter 766. Yixing was overjoyed when he sensed that the power of arrow Tao in his body was soaring. He felt that the void around him had become weak. He could easily break the void if he ran the power of arrow Tao in his body. Just by revealing a trace of the power of arrow Tao, the void around Yixing began to vibrate. As long as Yixing was willing, his entire body could shatter the void like an arrow and appear dozens or hundreds of miles away in an instant. This kind of speed was simply teleportation. Teleportation could only be done by a king who had comprehended the true meaning of space Tao. Yixing smiled. Even a 3-star king would not be able to resist such a fast speed and such a sharp aura. If he used his astrology, his strength would reach a higher level. Yixing would not be afraid even if he was a 4-star king. Yixing was confident that his strength would be in the first level of any peak in the outer sect. In the 10th peak, he would be the absolute overlord. Whoosh! Yixing let out a long breath and withdrew his aura. All the sharpness disappeared and returned to normal. However, the disciples who were comprehending Arrow Dao here felt the sharp aura that Yixing had just revealed. They all looked at Yixing. Zhuo Fifan widened his eyes in surprise. You have comprehended arrow intent. Zhuo Fifan was also an expert in Arrow Dao. He had already reached the 3rd level of one with the arrow. He came to Enlightenment Mountain to comprehend arrow intent. If he succeeded, his strength would increase greatly. Right now, his battle prowess was only comparable to a 4-star king. Once he comprehended the arrow intent, he would be able to defeat all 4-star kings and be almost invincible. At that time, he would not only be in the first tier of the 7th peak, but he would also be one of the strongest disciples in the entire 10 peaks. However, even though he had benefited a lot from the Enlightenment peak, he was still far from comprehending the arrow intent. On the other hand, Yixing was only a 9th-star Highness Lord, yet he had already comprehended the arrow intent from becoming one with the arrow in just over half a year. To comprehend a martial intent before becoming a king, in the lower continents and middle continents, that was a legendary existence. Even in the Dark Star continent, such a person was extremely rare. Usually, only one would appear every few hundred years. The Dark Star Divine Palace had already had several generations of disciples, but such a person had never appeared. Looking at Yixing, Zhuo Fifan was astonished and shocked. Yixing nodded to Zhuo Fifan. He stood up and said, "Senior Martial Brother Zhuo, I have achieved my goal. I'll take my leave first. Goodbye." Looking at Yixing's back, Zhuo Fifan thought to himself, Junior Brother Yi is from a middle continent, and his bloodline is at most at the level of quasi-god, which is not outstanding. I wonder what level his destiny has reached. If it is good enough, he will definitely soar to the sky in the Divine Palace, and become the top disciple in recent years. After Yixing left Enlightenment Mountain, he used the arrow intent and the star gang in his body. His entire body erupted with an extremely sharp aura, shattering the void around him. Hu Yixing took a step forward, moving at an extremely fast speed in the shattered void. In half a blink of an eye, he had shuttled through a long void hole in the void. The space of the starry sky continent was very stable. Although Yixing had shattered the void, the essence of the space was not damaged. In the blink of an eye, the void hole was filled with air and returned to normal. Yixing appeared in the distant sky and estimated the distance. He had just shot out like an arrow. In half a blink of an eye, he had shattered the void and shuttled through hundreds of miles. This speed, it was one thing to think, but it was another thing to actually do it. Yixing's heart beat fiercely, but he was very happy. Yixing shuttled through the void as if he had teleported. Soon, he returned to the 10th peak and arrived at the 71st courtyard. He used the speed communication pearl to send a message to Feng Xiaoxiao. Feng Xiaoxiao replied that she had already entered Enlightenment Mountain to comprehend the sword principle. Feng Xiaoxiao's attainments in the sword principle were also very high. She had already reached the 3rd level of one with the sword and was only a step away from comprehending sword intent. Currently, Feng Xiaoxiao was only an 8th-star High Lord. There was an extremely high chance that she would be like Yixing and comprehend a martial intent before becoming a king. Yixing also sent a message to Zhao Yanling, Ping Ju, Lu Xiong, and Qiu Yan. The 3 of them were cultivating in their rooms and immediately left. Senior Apprentice Brother Yixing. As the 4 of them saw Yixing, their faces lit up with joy. Yixing asked, "Did anything happen in the past half year?" To enter Enlightenment Mountain, one needed to calm their mind. Moreover, new disciples only had one chance to enter Enlightenment Mountain in their first year. Yixing didn't want to be disturbed once he entered Enlightenment Mountain and waste this opportunity. Therefore, when Yixing went to Enlightenment Mountain, he had already told them not to disturb him before he returned from Enlightenment Mountain. He knew nothing about what had happened in the past half year. Zhao Yanling and the others naturally knew what Yixing wanted to know. Zhao Yanling said, "In the past half year, we spent most of our time cultivating in our rooms. We only went to the plaza at the foot of the mountain when Elder Zhao Yuan and Elder Wu Mingtong were explaining cultivation. However, every time we went to the plaza at the foot of the mountain, the disciples of Starcloud Continent would make things difficult for us. Especially Lu Fongyun and Lin Chao. Once, they injured junior apprentice brother Feng and senior apprentice brother Ping Ju and almost captured junior apprentice sister Qiu Yan. Fortunately, senior apprentice brother Gao Jian of Starfield Continent intervened and resolved our calamity." Gao Jian, this name flashed through Yixing's mind. This was one of the 8 people ranked in the first level of the 10th peak. He was a 3rd-level Astral Sea Realm swordsman. Yixing's gaze fell on Peng Ju and said, "How are junior apprentice brother Peng and junior apprentice brother Feng's injuries? Are you all right now?" Peng Ju patted his chest and said, "My injuries were not serious. I have already recovered. Junior apprentice brother Feng's injuries were a bit serious, but he has already recovered. He only went to Enlightenment Mountain after he recovered." Yixing's eyes seemed to have flames of anger as he said, "Who injured junior apprentice brother Feng? Was it Lu Fongyun or Lin Chao?" The disciples of Starcloud Continent had gone too far. Yixing was very unhappy in his heart. Now, Yixing's strength was the absolute overlord of the 10th peak. Even if Starcloud Continent had a first-level expert like Lu Li, Yixing still planned to find Starcloud Continent's disciples to establish his might. An eye for an eye. It was Lin Chao. The 4 said at the same time. Then, Zhao Yanling saw that Yixing still didn't know who Lin Chao was and said, "Senior apprentice brother Yi, Lin Chao is a 3-star king. He is much stronger than Lu Fongyun. It doesn't matter how much stronger he is than Lu Fongyun. He has to pay the price for injuring my Starcloud Continent's disciples," Yixing said. As soon as he finished speaking, he had already left the courtyard and was heading towards the 72nd courtyard. Zhao Yanling, Ping Ju, Lu Xiong, and Qiu Yan saw this and quickly followed. Courtyard 72nd. Yixing strode in and shouted, "Lin Chao, Lu Fongyun, get out here." Chapter 767. Because of Lu Li, who was ranked first, the disciples of Starcloud Continent had always been arrogant and domineering among the disciples of the 10th peak. With the exception of a few Starry Sky continents that also had first-tier powerhouses, the rest of the Starry Sky continent's disciples did not pay any attention to them. Lin Chao was a 3-star king, second only to Lu Li among the disciples of Starcloud Continent. Lu Fongyun was Lu Li's younger brother. Both of them had high statuses among the disciples of Starcloud Continent. Now that they heard someone shouting for Lin Chao and Lu Fongyun to come out, the disciples of Starcloud Continent were enraged and rushed out of their rooms. Lin Chao and Lu Fongyun were not in the courtyard. The former was ranked 2nd and the latter was 3rd. They were both cultivating in the cultivation tower. In the 72nd courtyard, there were only some 1-star and 2-star king-level disciples. Even so, each of them had a domineering aura and ferocious eyes. Seeing that the person who came was only a disciple of the 71st courtyard, their eyes were filled with contempt. The 71st courtyard was occupied by the disciples of Starcloud Continent. Starcloud Continent was the weakest of the mid-sized continents, while Starcloud Continent was one of the strongest. The two could not be compared. Lu Fengyun was defeated by Yi Xing, so naturally, he would not spread the news. Therefore, when the disciples of Starcloud Continent saw that Yi Xing was only a 9-star venerable lord, they were even more disdainful and did not put Yi Xing in their eyes. When Yi Xing's voice faded away, Xiao Yanling and the other 4 finally caught up. The disciples of Starcloud Continent looked at Yi Xing's group of 5 with sneers on their faces. A 2-star king stepped forward and coldly said, "Ants of Starcloud Continent, you must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts. How dare you act so presumptuously in front of the disciples of Starcloud Continent?" Another 2-star king shouted, "Don't think that you can be arrogant just because you have senior brother Gao Jian's support. You dare to pick a fight. Even senior brother Gao Jian can't save you. You are courting death. Today, I will teach you a lesson." Yi Xing's gaze swept across the crowd. The 2-star kings were far inferior to Lu Fengyun. Lin Chao was a 3-star king, but the 2 of them were not among them. Yi Xing said, "Where are Lin Chao and Lu Fengyun? Tell them that I, Yi Xing, am looking for them. Tell them to get their asses over here. How dare you challenge senior brother Lin Chao and senior brother Lu Fengyun? I, Huang Kunlong, will teach you a lesson first." Among the Starcloud Continent's disciples, a 1-star king roared in anger. Huang Kunlong was at the peak of the first level of the Star Sea realm. Among the 1-star king realm disciples of the Starcloud Continent, his strength was at the peak. Wouldn't it be easy for a peak 1-star king to deal with a 9th-star venerable lord? Towards Huang Kunlong's actions, none of the Starcloud Continent's disciples stopped him. Instead, a disdainful sneer appeared on their lips. As soon as Huang Kunlong finished speaking, he leaped up and punched out. This punch came down from above, bringing with it the power to destroy mountains. A huge fist force blasted towards Yi Xing. Boom! A loud explosion rang out, like a thunderclap descending from the heavens. The airflow in the void shook, and layers upon layers of air waves rose. Huang Kunlong had used 80 to 90% of his strength. Even a 1-star king of the same realm would find it hard to resist. Using such a punch against a 9th-star venerable lord, it was obvious that Huang Kunlong wanted to heavily injure Yi Xing to the point where he couldn't even crawl up. Xiao Yanling, Ping Ju, and the others were all 1-star kings. They could feel the terror of Huang Kunlong's punch, but they didn't panic. They were very clear about Yi Xing's strength. Even a peak 2-star king wasn't a match for Yi Xing. Huang Kunlong was merely a 1-star king. Facing this punch, Yi Xing felt as if he was facing a spring breeze. His expression was normal, and he didn't move at all. Seeing that the huge fist force was about to land on Yi Xing's head, Yi Xing suddenly made his move. Yi Xing suddenly stretched out his hand and pointed out. His fingertip shone with resplendent starlight, and astral energy condensed into an arrowhead. The astral energy that contained the intent of the arrow erupted with a terrifying penetrating power, and the gathering of fire yuan qi filled this finger with a berserk power. The power of this finger was berserk, and its penetrating power was terrifying. Huang Kunlong's astral energy was like a balloon that had been pierced by a needle, and it instantly exploded. As for Yi Xing's finger force, it continued forward like an arrow piercing through the void, and it instantly collided with Huang Kunlong's fist. Even though Huang Kunlong's fist was protected by a high-grade profound-grade glove, when it collided with the arrowhead-like astral energy, he still felt a sharp energy penetrate his fist, and it was as painful as being pierced by a needle. Huang Kunlong let out a miserable groan as he retracted his fist like a bolt of lightning, and his body shot back explosively. Bang! Huang Kunlong flew back dozens of meters, and he crashed into the wall of the house with a loud bang. The material of the house was sturdy, and it was strengthened by a formation, so it didn't collapse. However, Huang Kunlong's eyes were blurred, and they were filled with stars. The qi and blood in his body were surging. Under the destruction of the sharp energy that had invaded his body, his internal organs were instantly injured, and he spat out blood. With a light finger, he had injured a one-star king. Yixing's strength was far beyond the expectations of the Starcloud Continent's disciples. The sneers on their faces instantly froze, and then they disappeared. The first two-star king to speak suddenly erupted with a terrifying aura. Senior brother Wei Zhong, he actually dared to injure a disciple of our Starcloud Continent. Kill him. Senior brother Wei Zhong, show him who's boss. The other disciples of the Starcloud Continent all shouted loudly. Huang Kunlong, who had fallen far away, also shouted, Senior brother Wei Zhong, take revenge for me. Beat him until he vomits blood, beat him until he can't stand up. Whoosh! A ray of starlight soared into the sky. The two-star king, Wei Zhong, had used his astrology. Among the two-star kings, Wei Zhong was the strongest. Although he wasn't as strong as Lu Fengyun, he wasn't far off. Although Yixing was only a 9th-star sovereign lord, his ability to defeat Huang Kunlong with a single finger was truly shocking. Even Wei Zhong, as one of the strongest two-star kings, didn't dare to underestimate him. Therefore, he used his astrology from the start. Yixing's expression remained the same. Wei Zhong's astrology wasn't enough to make him look at him in a different light. In Yixing's eyes, Wei Zhong and Huang Kunlong weren't much different. Feeling Yixing's disdain, Wei Zhong furrowed his brows, and his heart was filled with anger. Humph! Wei Zhong coldly snorted and shouted, I want to see how strong you, a 9th-star sovereign lord, are. Golden Bell Shield of Firm Essence. As his voice fell, the astral energy within Wei Zhong's body revolved, instantly forming a shield that could be seen with the naked eye, protecting his entire body. The Golden Bell Shield of Firm Essence was both offensive and defensive, but its defensive aspect was even more outstanding. When using this technique, Wei Zhong could fight against any two-star king. Even someone as strong as Lu Fengyun, a peak two-star king, wouldn't be able to break through his Golden Bell Shield in a short time. As for the Golden Bell Shield's offensive aspect, although it wasn't as outstanding as its defensive aspect, it was still quite powerful. With Wei Zhong's strength, ordinary two-star kings wouldn't be able to block it. Chapter 768. Yixing looked at the golden shield around Wei Zhong. His eyes were still calm and unperturbed. Break! Yixing bellowed as he took a step forward. His body shot out like an arrow, piercing through the void and appearing in front of Wei Zhong. Then, he pointed a finger at Wei Zhong. The tip of his finger shone brightly like an arrow, and the void in front of him crumbled. In the blink of an eye, the fingertip, which carried a resplendent light, pointed at the golden barrier. Wei Zhong was very confident in his defense. Seeing Yixing taking the initiative to attack, he laughed loudly and shouted, "Good timing." As he spoke, Wei Zhong circulated his astral energy to the limit. While defending himself, he was also prepared to attack. When Yixing's finger collided with Wei Zhong's golden energy shield and was affected by the rebound, it would be the best time for Wei Zhong to attack. At that time, Yixing would definitely be unable to dodge or block his punch. One punch would be enough to severely injure Yixing. In the blink of an eye, Yixing's finger landed outside Wei Zhong's golden energy shield. Just as Wei Zhong was about to launch a counterattack against Yixing, a crisp sound rang out, causing Wei Zhong's expression to change drastically. He saw the golden energy shield shatter under Yixing's finger. The finger shone brightly as it continued to move forward. Unstoppable, it pierced through everything and landed on Wei Zhong's body. Bang! This finger did not penetrate Wei Zhong's black grade high-rank inner armor, but the huge impact caused an explosion, and Wei Zhong was immediately sent flying backwards. Just like Huang Kunlong, Wei Zhong crashed into the wall behind him and spat out a mouthful of blood. As a two-star king, Wei Zhong was also defeated by Yixing with a single finger. Hiss, the disciples present sucked in a breath of cold air. Zhao Yanling, Ping Ju, and the other disciples from Star Crescent Continent were shocked. Yixing was able to defeat Wei Zhong with a single finger. This meant that Yixing's strength had greatly improved since he first arrived at Dark Star Continent. As for the disciples of Star Cloud Continent, they didn't look at Yixing with the slightest bit of contempt. Their eyes were filled with fear. Was this still a 9th star venerable? They had never seen a 9th star sovereign injuring a 2-star sovereign with a single finger. Thud, 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 looking at Yixing, the disciples of Star Cloud Continent involuntarily took a step back. You. What do you want? A 2-star king asked. His attitude was completely different from before. Yixing said, What do I want? Didn't I say just now that Lin Chao and Lu Fongyun had to get their asses over here? How could the Star Cloud Continent's disciples dare to disobey? One after another, they transmitted the message. Lin Chao and Lu Fongyun were both cultivating in the cultivation pagoda. When they received the news, they were both shocked and furious. The two of them left the cultivation room and quickly returned to the 72nd courtyard from the cultivation pagoda. Yixing, how dare you! Lu Fongyun had just arrived outside the mansion when a furious voice could be heard. Then, Lu Fongyun and Lin Chao both entered the mansion. Yixing looked over. He had known Lu Fongyun for a long time. In fact, he had also met Lin Chao on the first day of entering the sect. It was only now that he carefully sized up Lin Chao. In terms of appearance, Lin Chao was much more refined than Lu Fongyun. He was also more delicate and handsome. Wearing a blue robe, he had a valiant aura. However, Lin Chao's gaze always had a sinister feeling, which greatly damaged his valiant aura. Instead, it seemed a little evil. While Yixing was sizing up Lin Chao's gaze also looked over at Yixing. As a 3rd-star sovereign, a second-tier existence, no matter how heaven-defying Yixing's battle record was, whether he had defeated Wei Zhong or Lu Fongyun, Lin Chao didn't treat Yixing as an opponent on the same level as him. The gaze he used to size up Yixing was filled with contempt. Lin Chao said coldly, his voice chilling. You, are Yixing. Yixing's voice also chilled people. You, are Lin Chao. The corners of Lin Chao's mouth curled up, revealing a trace of a cold smile. That's right, I'm Lin Chao. A mere 9th-star sovereign lord who defeated 2 2-star sovereigns. You think your battle strength is heaven-defying, yet you dare to provoke me, Lin Chao. I have to say that your guts are not small. Yixing smiled indifferently. Lin Chao continued to sneer. It seems like you don't know the difference between 2-star sovereigns and 3rd-star sovereigns. Yixing said, it doesn't matter how big the difference is. What's important is that regardless of whether you're a 2-star sovereign or a 3rd-star sovereign, anyone who dares to bully my friends won't have a good ending. Lin Chao, today, I'll return double the damage you've done to junior brother Feng. Ha 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 ha. Lin Chao laughed loudly as if he had heard the funniest joke. It seems like I'll have to give you an even more severe lesson today. Only then will you know how stupid you are. As his voice fell, Lin Chao raised his hand, and a black treasured spear appeared in his hand. Including Lu Fongyun, the Star Cloud Continent's disciples retreated in all directions. With a 3rd-star sovereign taking action, they didn't dare to get too close. Yixing waved his hand, indicating for Zhao Yanling and the others to retreat further away. The black treasured spear in Lin Chao's hand was pointed at Yixing as he laughed. Yixing, I heard that you're proficient in archery. Archery cultivators need a large space to display their full strength. The space in the courtyard is too small. Do you want to change seats? Ha ha ha. Lin Chao's laughter was filled with mockery. His meaning was to find a bigger space. Yixing wasn't his opponent either. Yixing's expression was calm as he said, "No need. No matter where we are, it's more than enough to defeat you." Lin Chao's eyes narrowed. Yixing's reply infuriated him greatly. "Arrogant!" Lin Chao roared. As soon as he finished speaking, his body moved, thrusting out his spear. The black treasured spear was like a dancing dragon, arriving in front of Yixing in an instant. Even Zhao Yanling and the others, who were standing far behind Yixing, felt a gust of wind blowing against their faces at this moment. A sense of fear rose in their hearts. One could imagine how powerful this spear was. Yixing was the target of this spear. One could imagine that his feelings would be 100 times stronger. However, Yixing didn't feel any fear, nor did he panic. Yixing's expression was as calm as before, but his aura rose explosively. A third-star sovereign was indeed incomparable to a two-star sovereign. Although Yixing was confident, he didn't underestimate his opponent. In an instant, the astral energy within Yixing's body revolved. Fire yuan qi gathered from all directions, causing his aura to rise explosively. He was like a raging flame god of war. Just as Lin Chao's spear was about to pierce Yixing's body swayed. In an instant, he disappeared as if he had teleported, leaving behind a hole in the void. The astral spear missed. Yixing instantly appeared behind Lin Chao and pointed his finger at him. Astral energy gathered at the tip of his finger to form an arrow. The arrow intent condensed at one point, and its penetrative power was terrifying. At the same time, the raging fire yuan qi gathered, increasing the arrow's power. Whoosh! The astral energy was like an arrow, shooting behind Lin Chao in an instant. Chapter 769. Lin Chao's face was filled with shock. Yixing's speed had exceeded Lin Chao's expectations. He had never expected that Yixing would be able to dodge his spear at such a short distance and counterattack so quickly. Yixing's finger was like an arrow. It was too fast, and Lin Chao had no time to block it. He could only roar as the astral energy in his body exploded. Whoosh! A ball of energy, with Lin Chao's body as the center, instantly spread out in all directions. A visible shockwave spread out in all directions, creating a shockwave. As a 3-star king, the energy produced by Lin Chao's astral energy was extremely terrifying. Any 2-star martial artist would not be able to get close to him at this moment. They would be blown away by this energy. However, the power of Yixing's finger attack was not only at the 2-star king level, but it also had a terrifying penetrative power. It could penetrate through everything and was unstoppable. The energy attack was penetrated by the astral energy like an arrow and instantly shattered. The astral energy arrow was unstoppable. It shot forward and shattered the energy attack layer by layer. Finally, it hit Lin Chao's back. Although the energy attack from the astral energy was penetrated, it still weakened the astral energy arrow by a lot. Lin Chao had a high-grade mystic-grade inner armor on his body. Although the astral energy arrow's penetrative power was terrifying, it could not penetrate the high-grade mystic-grade inner armor. This attack only pushed Lin Chao a few steps forward. It was not a big deal. However, Lin Chao was almost knocked to the ground by Yixing's finger in front of everyone's eyes. He almost fell flat on his face, which made him extremely furious. Whoosh! At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. Yixing attacked with another finger attack. The astral energy contained arrow intent. Once Yixing attacked, it was like an arrow. Its speed was extremely fast and sharp. At this moment, Lin Chao had already retracted his black treasured spear. He instantly swept it and attacked behind him. Although Lin Chao's speed was not as fast as Yixing's, the speed of his attack in a small area was as fast as teleportation. The black treasured spear instantly hit the astral energy arrow. Boom! With a loud explosion, the astral energy arrow was shattered by the spear. Lin Chao also felt an attack coming from the black treasured spear. His arms shook, and he could not help but take a step back. What a powerful force! Lin Chao's heart trembled. The power of this astral finger arrow was actually not much inferior to the power of his spear. However, Yixing's astral finger attack was clearly much more flexible than his spear attack. No matter how one became one with the spear, it was impossible to change the length of the spear. How could a spear be as flexible as fingers? The difference in attack power was not big, but the difference in agility was huge. Lin Chao was shocked. He instantly determined that he was not his opponent. Yixing didn't give him any time to think. In the blink of an eye, Yixing's body shifted and appeared in another location as if he had teleported. His fingers shot out like an arrow and attacked Lin Chao. It took a long time to describe, but in an instant, an astral finger arrow shot out. Whoosh 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 whoosh, Yixing's movement and attack speed were both extremely fast. Within a breath, he had already shot out several astral finger arrows, attacking Lin Chao from different directions. Lin Chao waved his black treasured spear like a dancing dragon. His spear skills were displayed to the extreme, and it was almost impossible for anything to pass through. However, under the attack of the astral finger arrows, he still couldn't keep up with the rhythm. Such a fast attack only lasted for 3 breaths of time. Lin Chao was starting to lose his strength, and he was starting to panic. Stop! Lin Chao saw that he couldn't hold on any longer, and he hurriedly shouted, "Let's talk nicely." Now you want to talk things over nicely. It was too late. Yixing's speed did not slow down at all. The astral finger arrows were endless, and they were as fast as lightning. The kings present could only see a series of afterimages. They couldn't even see Yixing's attack clearly. Lin Chao was the strongest 2-star king present, but he could barely see Yixing's attack. In his panic, he quickly showed signs of defeat. Whoosh! A astral finger arrow brushed past the black treasured spear and shot into Lin Chao's wrist. The wrist was the joint between the glove and the inner armor. There was a gap that could be found, and it was the weakest point of the defense. The astral finger arrow was blocked, but the terrifying penetrating power found a gap and entered Lin Chao's wrist. A sharp pain came, and Lin Chao cried out in pain. The black treasured spear flew out of his hand. Whoosh! Yixing's figure was like an arrow. He instantly appeared in front of Lin Chao and grabbed out. Yixing's palm was as fast as an arrow. Lin Chao instinctively wanted to dodge, but it was too late. His injured wrist was caught by Yixing. The astral finger that contained the arrow intent shot out from Lin Chao's palm. It was like a small arrow, and it attacked Lin Chao's wrist through the gap. The astral arrow intent penetrated Lin Chao's body like an arrow. Everywhere it passed, his blood and meridians were damaged. It first rushed from his wrist to his arm, and then from his arm to his body. Ah! The sharp pain that came from his meridians and bone marrow caused Lin Chao to cry out in pain. The disciples of Starcloud Continent were all shocked. They didn't expect Lin Chao to be defeated so quickly and so miserably. Stop! Lu Fongyun shouted, "Yixing, don't be too presumptuous. You have gone too far today. When my brother comes back, you will have to bear the consequences." The astral energy in Lin Chao's body, under the attack of Yixing's astral arrow intent, was completely defeated. The intense pain made him kneel on the ground, losing the strength to fight back. Yixing grabbed Lin Chao's wrist and looked at Lu Fongyun, saying, "Presumptuous. Too much. I want to be presumptuous today. I want to go too far. If you don't like it, go find Lu Li." With that, Yixing stepped out and kicked Lin Chao away. He continued, "Lu Fongyun, you still have the face to speak. Do you think I can leave you out today? Lu Fengyun's face changed. He was like a cat with its hair standing on end. He shouted, "What do you want to do?" Whoosh! As soon as Lu Fengyun finished speaking, Yixing had already appeared in front of him. He stretched out his two palms and grabbed at Lu Fengyun. Lu Fengyun's face changed. Even Lin Chao, a 3-star king, was not a match for Yixing. He was only a 2-star king. Naturally, his strength was far from Yixing's. In an instant, Lu Fengyun used his astrology. At the same time, he took out an upper-grade Xian weapon and retreated quickly. In terms of speed, how could Lu Fengyun compare to Yixing? Even though Lu Fengyun had used all his strength to retreat, Yixing's hand still grabbed at him quickly. He was getting closer to Lu Fengyun's body quickly. Whoosh! In a hurry, Lu Fengyun swung his sword and chopped at Yixing's wrists. Yixing pressed down with his right hand. His 5 fingers formed a claw and grabbed at the sword. Clang! With a crisp sound, the upper-grade Xian weapon shook violently and almost flew out of Lu Fengyun's hand. Yixing's left hand continued to move forward and grabbed Lu Fengyun's neck. Astral arrow intent shot out. Chapter 770. The astral arrow intent was like tiny arrows, extremely sharp as they collided within Lu Fengyun's body. Even Lin Chao, a 3-star king, could not block the attack of the astral arrow intent. Lu Fengyun was naturally inferior. Under the attack of the astral arrow intent, the astral energy within Lu Fengyun's body was utterly destroyed. Without the protection of the astral energy, Lu Fengyun's flesh and blood were instantly pierced by the astral arrow intent, causing him to be severely injured. Puff! Lu Fengyun spat out a large mouthful of blood. Yixing was standing in front of Lu Fengyun. When the blood that Lu Fengyun spat out was still an inch away from Yixing's body, it was blocked by an invisible force and shot away. Yixing did not even touch a single drop. With the tyrannical power of the astral arrow intent, Yixing could completely destroy Lu Fengyun's flesh and blood, killing him completely. However, when disciples fought, it was fine to be injured, but it would be troublesome if someone died. When Lu Fengyun spat out blood, Yixing swung his hand and flung Lu Fengyun away like a dead dog. Thud, 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 thud. The disciples of Starcloud Continent retreated one after another, looking at Yixing with eyes full of fear and dread. Even the 3-star king Lin Chao was defeated by Yixing. Among the disciples of Starcloud Continent, besides Lu Li who was ranked first, no one else was a match for Yixing. However, Lu Li had already entered Enlightenment Peak. In the first year, new disciples only had one chance to enter Enlightenment Peak. Once they entered, they would not easily come out. Therefore, currently, no one in Starcloud Continent could compete with Yixing. With such a big matter happening, someone naturally sent a message to Lu Li. Soon, Yixing received a message from a stranger in his communication bead. The message came from number 7131, and the content was, "You dare to hurt my disciples of Starcloud Continent. I, Lu Li, will pay you back tenfold in the future." The person who sent the message was Lu Li, the strongest disciple of Starcloud Continent. He was ranked first among the disciples of the 10th peak. Yixing replied to number 7131, "Bring it on." Somewhere in Enlightenment Mountain. Lu Li, in his red robe, looked gloomy. He looked at the message sent by Yixing and snorted in anger. "Yixing, you will regret this." Lu Li sent another message to Yixing and then cut off the communication bead. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes and continued to meditate. There was only one chance to enter the Enlightenment Mountain every year. Lu Li would not leave since he had not reached enlightenment yet. What was more, he was clear about his priorities. In the Enlightenment Mountain, the most important thing was to calm his mind and focus on learning martial arts. In the number 72 mansion, Yixing read the message from Lu Li and smiled. Clearly, Luli would not come out from the Enlightenment Mountain anytime soon. What was more, Yixing was full of confidence. Even if he had to fight Luli face to face, he was not afraid at all. He was not afraid of Luli coming back. Yixing's gaze swept across the disciples of the Starcloud continent and said, "Today's matter ends here. Remember this lesson in your hearts. If you dare to make things difficult for the disciples of the Starcloud continent in the future, it will not be as simple as today." As soon as he finished speaking, Yixing led Zhao Yanling and the others away. Number 71 mansion was adjacent to the mansion where the disciples of Starcloud continent lived. Basically, only the disciples of Starcloud continent bullied them. Now, Yixing had solved the problem of the disciples of Starcloud continent. As long as Luli did not come back from Enlightenment Mountain, the disciples of Starcloud continent would not dare to act rashly in front of the disciples of Starcloud continent. Now that Yixing had nothing to worry about, he naturally went to the cultivation tower to cultivate. He was only at the 9th level of astral reaching realm. The amount of astral power he needed to consolidate his cultivation was much less than that of King Realm warriors. The cultivation speed inside the cultivation tower was much faster than outside. There was still half a year before the 1 year was up, which was enough time for Yixing to consolidate his cultivation to a very deep level. At the top of the 10th peak, inside the cultivation tower, Yixing directly went to the 3rd floor. There were 4 cultivation rooms on the 3rd floor. The doors were closed, and there were identity plates hanging outside. Clearly, there were people cultivating inside. The 4 identity plates had the names of Zheng Haoyu, Sun Gang, Gao Jian, and Zhen Zihan. They were all disciples of the 1st level. Yixing's strength was no weaker than the disciples of the 1st level of the 10th peak. He originally wanted to find a cultivation room on the 3rd level of the cultivation pagoda, but when he saw that there were people occupying it, he retreated to the 2nd level. There were a total of 12 cultivation rooms on the 2nd floor. There were only a few cultivation rooms in the cultivation tower, but there were a lot of disciples in the top 3 levels. If the rooms were divided equally, there would be 2 to 3 people cultivating in each room. The competition would be fierce. Now that the new disciples had been in the sect for half a year, whether they wanted to comprehend martial arts in the Enlightenment Mountain or consolidate their cultivation in the cultivation tower, the disciples had already made their decision. Every single cultivation room was occupied by someone. It was the same on the 3rd floor, the 2nd floor, and the 1st floor. However, Yixing found an empty cultivation room on the 2nd floor. This was originally the cultivation room that Lin Chao had occupied. Lin Chao had been badly injured by Yixing in the 72nd courtyard, and was still recovering. He hadn't returned to the cultivation tower yet. Since there was an empty room, Yixing naturally wouldn't be polite. He hung his identity plate outside the door and entered the 8th cultivation room on the 2nd floor. As soon as he entered the cultivation room, Yixing immediately sensed the rich astral energy in the surroundings. Yixing's super brain calculated and soon understood that cultivating here would be 2 times faster than cultivating in his room. In other words, cultivating here for a month would be more effective than cultivating in his room for 3 months. This is really a good place. Feeling the astral energy in the surroundings, Yixing's mood was very good. He thought to himself, there are still 4 more months before the 1 year end. If I cultivate here for 4 months, the effects will be better than cultivating in my room for a year. It should be enough for me to consolidate my cultivation to the peak of the 9th level. Yixing quickly circulated the high-grade Mystic Class Meteor Fall incantation. At the same time, he also used the Black Hole constellation. The black hole constellation in his body and the black hole constellation above him revolved at the same time, madly absorbing the astral energy in the surroundings to consolidate his cultivation. A day later, Lin Chao returned to the cultivation room. Seeing that someone was cultivating in the room he had previously occupied, he was instantly enraged. However, when he saw that the identity plate outside the door belonged to Yixing, although Lin Chao's anger didn't diminish, it was replaced by fear. Without saying anything, Lin Chao left the cultivation pagoda. He didn't dare to ask Yixing for the cultivation room back. Firstly, the cultivation room didn't belong to him, and secondly, he couldn't take it back from Yixing. Yixing cultivated in the 8th cultivation room on the 2nd floor, day after day. A huge amount of astral energy was absorbed by Yixing's body, and the strength of his astral energy increased by 1,000 miles every day. The peaceful days of cultivation lasted for more than 3 months, until one day. Boom! A loud explosion woke Yixing from his cultivation state. Chapter 771. The sound came from the door of the cultivation room. The door of the cultivation room was made of ores and was extremely sturdy. Moreover, it was reinforced by a formation. Even a high-level king would have a hard time destroying it. Although the door of the cultivation room was difficult to destroy, sound could still be transmitted in. That explosion just now was obviously someone attacking the door of the cultivation room. Kong. After 2 breaths of time, another explosion sounded. Yixing even felt the door of the cultivation room shake. Yixing raised his eyebrows and his eyes burned with anger. The most taboo thing to do during cultivation was to disturb someone. Attacking the door of the cultivation room while someone was cultivating was an extremely disrespectful act. Clearly, someone was deliberately looking for trouble. Could it be Lu Li has returned from Enlightenment Mountain? Yixing thought to himself. Among the disciples of the 10th peak, Yixing only had conflicts with the disciples of the Star Cloud continent. However, other than Lu Li, the disciples of the Star Cloud continent wouldn't come looking for trouble with Yixing. Yixing appeared behind the door of the cultivation room in a single step. Before the other party could attack again, he opened the door and walked out. On the 2nd floor of the cultivation tower, the explosion just now had obviously affected the other disciples. Many people came out of the cultivation tower. Those who were able to cultivate in the cultivation tower were all 3-star kings. 3-star kings were the elites of the elites in the 10th peak. Attacking the door of the cultivation room would affect everyone who was cultivating and would definitely be hated by everyone. However, when these 3-star kings came out of the cultivation rooms and saw the disciple who attacked the door of the cultivation room, they didn't get angry. Instead, they all looked at the door of the 8th cultivation room. Yixing also saw this person. On the first day of entering the Dark Star Temple, the disciples of the Star Cloud Continent and Star Cloud Continent had met face to face. Yixing was very sure that this person in front of him wasn't Lu Li. Although there were less than 2,000 disciples on the 10th peak, there were still 1,700 of them. Yixing wasn't familiar with many of them, so he didn't recognize this person. Yixing did not know this person, nor did he have any interactions with him, yet he was attacking his cultivation room. This was simply starting a grudge for no reason at all. Yixing truly did not understand this person's intentions. Yixing asked, "Who are you?" This person's stature was very majestic. Hearing this, he smiled and raised his head. "Who am I?" "Ha! Kid, you don't even recognize me, and you still dare to come to the 2nd level." Without waiting for Yixing to speak, the man slapped his chest forcefully and shouted, "I'll slaughter 10,000 cities." Although Yixing did not recognize the other party, he knew the name, Tu Wanqing. Tu Wanqing was a disciple ranked in the 2nd tier, and came from a powerful mid-tier continent, the Star Blood continent, which was stronger than the Star Cloud continent. Tu Wanqing could only be considered as the number 2 disciple of the Star Blood continent. The number 1 disciple was called Tu Qianzhang, who was ranked 1st. On the 10th peak, Tu Qianzhang was definitely famous. On the 2nd day after Yixing returned from Enlightenment Mountain, he entered the cultivation tower to cultivate. However, he had also heard of Tu Qianzhang's deeds. In the first half of the year, there were 3 fights between disciples of the first tier, and 2 of them were related to Tu Qianzhang. Tu Qianzhang had fought against Sun Gang and Zhen Zihan of the first tier, and won both of them. It was obvious that he was one of the strongest among the disciples of the first tier, so of course his name was known throughout the 10th peak. Because of Tu Qianzhang's existence, the disciples of the Star Blood continent on the 10th peak were naturally arrogant. Even the arrogant disciples of the Star Cloud continent had to back down when they met him. Although Tu Wanqing was not as famous as Tu Qianzhang, he was still one of the best among the disciples of the second tier. With Tu Qianzhang as his support, Tu Wanqing could do whatever he wanted on the 10th peak. He might not even give face to some of the disciples of the first tier. Tu Wanqing started cultivating in the cultivation pagoda, occupying a cultivation room. 3 months ago, he went to Enlightenment Peak to comprehend the Tao. His perception was not very high, and after comprehending for 3 months, he did not gain anything. He felt that it would be better for him to consolidate his cultivation to the peak of the 3rd layer of the astral sea realm in the cultivation room, which would allow him to enter the ranks of the first-level disciples. Thus, Tu Wanqing returned to the cultivation tower. On the 2nd floor of the cultivation tower, there were no more cultivation rooms available. At this time, Tu Wanqing saw Yi Xing's identity card. Yi Xing was a 9th star Venerable Lord, but he was ranked in the 3rd tier, and had the qualifications to cultivate in the cultivation tower. On the 10th peak, he was considered a special person. Many people knew about him, and Tu Wanqing was one of them. A 9th star Venerable Lord had the strength of a peak 2-star king. No matter which starry sky continent, this was an extremely heaven-defying battle strength. Many of the elite disciples were skeptical of Yi Xing's strength. Tu Wanqing did not believe that Yi Xing had the qualifications to enter the 3rd tier. Today, when he saw Yi Xing cultivating on the 2nd floor of the cultivation tower, he was instantly enraged. A 9th star Venerable Lord had the qualifications to cultivate on the 2nd floor of the cultivation tower? Absolutely not, Tu Wanqing concluded in his heart. Thus, Tu Wanqing ignored the taboo and attacked the door of the cultivation room. The main reason why he ignored the taboo was that he did not put Yi Xing, a 9th star Venerable Lord, in his eyes. Yi Xing looked at Tu Wanqing and said, "Do you know the consequences of attacking the door of the cultivation room when others are cultivating?" Tu Wanqing grinned and said, "Consequences? The consequences are for you to come out and go to the first tier that belongs to you. Otherwise." Tu Wanqing clenched his fists and twisted his body. All the bones in his body crackled. "Otherwise, I will teach you a lesson." Yi Xing said, "Lin Chao has already been defeated by me. According to the sect rules, I belong to the 2nd tier and have the qualifications to cultivate on the 2nd floor. You attacked the door of the cultivation room and disturbed my cultivation. How are you going to compensate me?" Yi Xing defeating Lin Chao was not a secret. Star Cloud Continent's disciples cared about their reputation and would not speak of it, but Star Crescent Continent's disciples did not care about their reputation. The news had already spread. Some disciples had already heard of this battle. The disciples of the 2nd tier were all 3-star kings, and they did not believe it. Therefore, the disciples on the 2nd floor of the cultivation tower were looking at Tu Wanqing and Yi Xing with great interest. If the two fought, they would be able to verify whether Yi Xing had really defeated Lin Chao. Tu Wanqing had just returned from the Enlightenment Mountain. In order to focus on comprehending the Tao, he had turned off the communication bead, so he did not know that Yi Xing had defeated Lin Chao. Tu Wanqing's cultivation was at the late 3rd level of the astral sea realm, only a step away from the peak 3rd level. His strength was strong, and among the disciples of the 2nd tier, he was one of the strongest. Even Lin Chao, who was also an outstanding disciple of the 2nd tier, was somewhat inferior in front of Tu Wanqing. However, Tu Wanqing also knew that even if he was stronger than Lin Chao, the gap between them was not that big. If Lin Chao was defeated by Yi Xing, wouldn't it mean that he, Tu Wanqing, was also not Yi Xing's opponent? This was something Tu Wanqing would never believe. Chapter 772. Hee hee. Tu Wanqing stared at Yixing and laughed. You still want compensation? Fine, I'll compensate you and reward you with a few slaps on the face. As his voice fell, Tu Wanqing's aura soared. A surge of terrifying power erupted from his body, causing the void to tremble. Bang! Tu Wanqing punched out. Like a thunderclap, the void in front of him shattered as he punched towards Yixing's face. On the second floor of the cultivation pagoda, there were cultivation rooms on all sides. In the middle was a large hall that was only 10 meters long and wide. For a king, a distance of 10 miles could be covered in an instant. Now that there was less than 10 meters between them, it was simply a close combat battle. Tu Wanqing's punch didn't even take a tenth of an instant to hit Yixing. However, in terms of speed, Yixing wasn't inferior to any low-step king. Yixing's figure instantly disappeared, and Tu Wanqing's lightning-fast punch missed. The space was small, and Tu Wanqing's fist aura was contained within his fist. Although the momentum didn't seem vast, its power wasn't small at all. Where Yixing stood, the space was instantly shattered by the fist aura. When his punch missed, Tu Wanqing heard the sound of something breaking through the air behind him. His reaction speed was extremely fast, and his senses were extremely sharp. Without even turning his head, he punched out. Bang! Fist and finger collided, and a loud explosion rang out. Tu Wanqing felt as if his fist had been shot by an arrow, and there was a piercing pain. His body couldn't help but take a few steps back. As for Yixing, he had neutralized Tu Wanqing's fist aura without even taking half a step back. The difference in strength between the two was obvious. In just the first round, the spectating disciples were certain that Yixing's victory over Lin Chao was not a lie. A 9th-star venerable lord had defeated a 3-star king. This was simply unbelievable. When the spectating disciples confirmed this result, they were incomparably shocked. The one who was the most shocked was Tu Wanqing. The fist aura was fierce, and the finger aura was sharp. When his fist clashed with Yixing's finger, he felt a piercing pain, but he was still pushed back. This meant that his strength was inferior, and the gap between them wasn't small. Whoosh! The void shattered. Yixing stabbed out with another finger, like an arrow piercing through the air. The speed at which the two exchanged blows was too fast. Only a tenth of a breath of time had passed after exchanging blows. Only king-level existences could see it clearly. Those below the king level probably couldn't see anything. Tu Wanqing immediately used his astrology, and a bright starlight soared into the sky. It was an extreme earth element astrology. Using astrology, Tu Wanqing's strength soared. His body was covered in a yellow glow. Regardless of whether it was his attack or defense, both had increased by several folds. Yixing's astral finger arrow was shattered by Tu Wanqing's punch. Yixing felt the pain coming from his fingertips and immediately retreated. The situation was instantly reversed. Tu Wanqing's strength was indeed higher than Lin Chao's by a notch. Yixing actually had an irresistible pressure when he did not use his astrology. Tu Wanqing's punch repelled Yixing, but there was no joy on his face because Yixing had yet to use his astrology. Kill! Tu Wanqing shouted. His astral energy exploded to the limit, and his speed increased to the limit. He unleashed his strongest punch, attacking Yixing with extreme speed. Yixing used his arrow intent and his body as an arrow. He instantly shattered the void and dodged to the side as if he had teleported. Tu Wanqing's punch missed. Boom! Tu Wanqing's punches were as fast as lightning. After his first punch missed, his second punch was already flying towards Yixing. The space of over 10 meters was too narrow. Tu Wanqing's fist force had enveloped the entire space. No matter where Yixing tried to hide, Tu Wanqing would know in an instant, and his attack would arrive in an instant. In the blink of an eye, Tu Wanqing threw out 10 punches. Yixing's body was like an arrow, and he dodged 10 times in a row. Even the 3-star kings who were spectating the battle were dazzled by the speed of the battle. Dodge. Let's see how many times you can dodge my attacks. Tu Wanqing shouted. As a late 3-star king, his astral energy was extremely dense. Although such fast attacks consumed a lot of his astral energy, he could still hold on for 2 hours without any problem. It was a long story, but the battle between the two had only lasted a little more than a breath's time. Every move and style had reached their limits, and a breath's time was enough for them to exchange 10 blows. Xiao! Suddenly, a fiery red starlight soared into the sky. The illusory image of a blazing star appeared in the sky. Yixing had used an extreme-grade flame star. Tu Wanqing's cultivation was profound, his speed was also very fast, and his defense was also very strong. Even if it was a first-grade disciple, it would not be easy to defeat him. Yixing did not intend to waste time with him, so he used his astrology. The flame star image poured down a surging flame star power, and Yixing was like a flame god. His whole body was red, and there were flames burning in the void. The power of the extreme fire star aspect combined with the perfect fire grand momentum caused Yixing's power to increase exponentially. In an instant, the power of Yixing's attack had increased by a large margin. Lose for me. Yixing shouted, and his fingers shot out like an arrow. It pierced through the void and shot towards Tu Wanqing. This time, the astral finger arrow was covered in a layer of scarlet flames, and its might was more than 10 times stronger than before. Just the terrifying might it revealed made every single 3-star king present feel a sense of suffocation. Tu Wanqing's expression changed. From Yixing's finger, he felt like he was facing Tu Qianzhang. It was an absolute pressure, and it made his heart tremble instinctively. Although he was afraid, deep in his heart, Tu Wanqing was more angry. He was a 3-star king, a genius of the star blood continent. He could not tolerate being defeated by a 9-star venerable lord. Roar! Tu Wanqing's black hair fluttered in the wind, and he roared like a mad lion. He unleashed all his power. Under such a crazy state, he had almost surpassed his limit, and he unleashed 120% of his power. Terrifying power condensed in his fists, and they bloomed with a bright yellow light. It was as if they had turned golden. In an instant, the golden fist collided with the scarlet flame arrow-like astral finger. There was no explosion as expected, and there was no violent explosion. At the moment when the fist and finger collided, the airflow in all directions surged towards the point of collision, as if there was a strong suction force. At this moment, it was as if time had stopped, and there was only silence. This process only lasted half a blink of an eye. Puff! Tu Wanqing spat out a mouthful of blood, and he was sent flying. A terrifying airwave was instantly generated, and it covered the entire hole. The airwave was so strong that the 3-star king disciples could not open their eyes, and they quickly retreated into the cultivation room. Bang! Tu Wanqing crashed into the wall, and he was stuck on the wall for a breath's time before he fell to the ground. Chapter 773. Soon, the 3-star kings who had retreated into the cultivation rooms rushed out. Looking at Yixing standing in the middle of the hall and Tu Wanqing who had fallen down the wall, all the disciples were dumbfounded. Tu Wanqing stood up with difficulty and spat out another mouthful of blood. His body swayed, and he almost fell down. Obviously, Tu Wanqing's injuries were not light. Attacking the door of someone's cultivation room when they were cultivating was a taboo. Yixing naturally wanted Tu Wanqing to suffer the consequences and pay the price. Tu Wanqing leaned against the wall, and after 2 to 3 breaths of time, he finally caught his breath and looked at Yixing fiercely. 2 to 3 breaths of time was very short for mortals or ordinary warriors. However, to a king who could attack more than 10 times in one breath, it was a very long time. With a king's vitality, ordinary injuries could be suppressed in less than half a breath. Tu Wanqing spent 2 to 3 breaths of time to suppress his injuries, which showed how serious his injuries were. Ever since he entered the Dark Star Divine Palace, Tu Wanqing had never suffered such a serious injury. In fact, in his 30 years of life, he had only suffered such a serious injury twice. Therefore, Tu Wanqing looked at Yi Xing with eyes full of anger and viciousness. Facing Tu Wanqing's anger and viciousness, Yi Xing's expression was normal as he said, "When I was cultivating, you attacked the door of my cultivation room. This is a taboo. Even if I crippled you today, the Peak Master wouldn't think that I went overboard. Now, I'm just giving you a small lesson, and you can't take it." Tu Wanqing was about to speak, but Yi Xing had already shouted, "Even if you can't take it, you have to take it. If you're not convinced, next time when I'm cultivating, you can attack the door as much as you want. However, next time, it won't be so simple. I'll still break your meridians and cripple your cultivation. Get lost." The only way to deal with a fierce person was to be even fiercer. Yi Xing's words had completely destroyed Tu Wanqing's momentum. Although Tu Wanqing was still angry, he didn't dare to say anything in front of Yi Xing, and left in a sorry state. As soon as Tu Wanqing left, Yi Xing became the focus of all the 3-star King Realm disciples. Yi Xing's gaze swept across the disciples. The disciples felt as if they had been struck by lightning. They didn't dare to meet his gaze and retreated into the cultivation rooms. Yi Xing also entered cultivation room number 8 and took out his communication bead. Soon, the communication bead received a message. As Yi Xing had expected, the message was sent by Tu Qianzhang, the number 1 figure in the Starblood continent. Tu Qianzhang said, "Boy, you should be glad that I'm at Enlightenment Mountain. Otherwise, I would definitely crush your wretched bones. However, don't be too happy. There's still a month before the year-long competition for the new disciples begins. At that time, I will let all the disciples hear your screams. Just you wait." Yi Xing smiled casually. Tu Qianzhang was indeed famous on the 10th peak, but he couldn't scare Yi Xing. Yi Xing had already comprehended the 3 great forces of heaven and earth to perfection, and he had also comprehended a martial intent in his Tao of archery. Let alone the 10th peak, even if it were the entire 10 peaks, as long as they were outer court disciples, Yi Xing wouldn't fear anyone. Although Tu Qianzhang was strong, he wasn't necessarily the number 1 disciple of the 10th peak. He couldn't be compared to the number 1 figures of the other 9 peaks. How could Yi Xing be afraid of him? Yi Xing replied to Tu Qianzhang, "I'll wait for you. Don't let me down." Tu Qianzhang replied quickly, "I won't let you down. I will only make you despair." Luli, Tu Qianzhang. It seems that the year-long competition for the new disciples won't be peaceful. Well, I'll settle all the grudges at that time. If I don't beat you down, you won't know who the real overlord of the 10th peak is. Yi Xing thought to himself. He was looking forward to the upcoming new disciple competition. The news of Tu Wanqing being defeated by Yi Xing on the 2nd level of the cultivation tower quickly spread among the disciples of the 10th peak. This time, there were more than 10 disciples who had witnessed the battle with their own eyes. They came from different mid-sized continents, and the news was spread much more widely than the battle between Yi Xing and Lin Chao. Yi Xing was originally a special person on the 10th peak. Now, even the 3-star king Tu Wanqing had been defeated by Yi Xing. When the disciples of the 10th peak heard the news, most of them were full of admiration for Yi Xing, a 9th-star venerable lord. Yi Xing's reputation on the 10th peak was naturally great. His reputation was so strong that he could catch up with the 8 disciples of the 1st level. Because of the impact of the battle with Tu Wanqing, the news of Yi Xing and Lin Chao's battle spread like wildfire. Almost all the disciples of the 10th peak knew that Yi Xing had offended Lu Li and Tu Qianzhang, two disciples of the first level. Yi Xing, Lu Li, and Tu Qianzhang would have a battle sooner or later. Currently, Lu Li and Tu Qianzhang were both in Enlightenment Mountain and would not return easily. However, when the 1-year period was up, all the new disciples would have to leave Enlightenment Mountain and a battle would be held. All the disciples knew that the battle between Yi Xing, Lu Li, and Tu Qianzhang would definitely take place during the competition. All the disciples were looking forward to the competition. They wanted to know the limit of Yi Xing's strength as a 9th star Venerable Lord. Could Yi Xing's strength be compared to the disciples of the first level? Everything would be revealed in the new disciple competition. The last month passed under the anticipation of the disciples. The 1-year period of the new disciples had finally arrived. Ming Feng had closed the cultivation tower a day earlier. Enlightenment Mountain was also sealed, and the disciples inside returned to their own peaks. Yi Xing had been cultivating on the 2nd floor of the cultivation tower for more than 4 months. The results were better than cultivating in his residence for a year. His cultivation base had stabilized to the peak of the 9th layer. Peak of the 9th layer of Astral Reaching Realm was only a step away from the 1st layer of Astral Reaching Realm. But in reality, it was the difference between a venerable and a king. It was a breakthrough of a major realm. For many martial artists, this was an extremely difficult barrier to break through. Even for martial artists with king's mandate and above, breaking through from venerable to king would require a long time. According to Yi Xing's estimation, if he were to continue cultivating in the cultivation tower, he would need another year or so to break through to Astral Sea Realm and become a king. With my strength, if I use all my trump cards and return to the Star Continent, I should be able to battle with Supreme King Meng Tai, and even defeat him. At that time, Brother He Biao and I will definitely be able to kill Meng Tai. At that time, the Great Yuan dynasty will have no leader, and will be destroyed in one fell swoop. The night before the competition, Yi Xing didn't think about the next day's battle. Instead, his thoughts returned to the Star Continent. He thought of Wei Qingxian, He Biao, and Hua Tianfeng. I wonder how they are now. Yi Xing couldn't wait to return. His gaze gradually became firm. No one could stop him from going home. Chapter 774. The grand competition for the new disciples began as scheduled. On this day, the 10 peaks of the outer court were bustling with noise and excitement. The disciples of each peak were gathered at the square at the foot of the mountain. As usual, there were 2 stages to the competition. The first stage was the group battle of the top 100. The new disciples would be divided into 50 groups, and the first and second of each group would be ranked in the top 100. The second stage was the point ranking competition. The top 100 disciples would fight against each other. A win would earn them 1 point, a draw would not earn them any points, and a loss would deduct 1 point. The final points would determine the ranking of the disciples, and the top 10 would be qualified to enter the Heavenly Bao Continent. In the first stage, Yi Xing was assigned to the 25th group. He was the seeded contestant of that group. There was another seeded contestant in that group, who was ranked in the 3rd level and was a 2-star peak king. In the end, Yi Xing was ranked first in his group and entered the top 100. There was no dark horse in the second place of his group, and it was the 2-star peak king. In the first stage, there were many matches. Even though they were divided into different groups, it still took a day to determine the top 100. The disciples who entered the top 100 were all ranked in the top 3 levels. There were no dark horses. In the first stage, the only dark horse was Feng Xiaoxiao. After a year, his cultivation had broken through to become a 9th star Venerable Lord. His strength had increased tremendously, and he had defeated a large number of 2-star kings. However, Feng Xiaoxiao had not broken through to the 9th star Venerable Lord level for long, and he had not comprehended sword intent yet. Although his strength was not weak among the two-star kings, he was still unable to defeat two-star peak kings and was unable to enter the top 100. On the second day, the grand competition ushered in the more intense second stage, the point-ranking competition. In theory, everyone would have to fight against the other 99 people. The point-ranking competition would be a very complicated competition. However, the purpose of the grand competition was to select the top 10 to enter the Heavenly Bow continent. Furthermore, the Dark Star Temple would only reward the top 10. Therefore, the top 10 rankings were determined. After that, the rankings were not important. In order to enter the top 10, one had to obtain at least 90 points. Every loss would result in a deduction of 1 point. This meant that as long as one lost or tied 10 matches, even if one won all the other 89 matches, one would not be able to enter the top 10. Therefore, there was a rule in the competition. Any disciple who entered the top 100 would be eliminated if they lost or tied for 10 matches in the second stage of the competition. After that, they would not need to compete with other disciples and would be judged as a failure to save time. The point-ranking competition was the main event of the new disciple competition. It was no longer held in different areas, but in the arena in the middle of the square. All the disciples were there to watch. Among all the disciples, the ones with the loudest cheers were the 8 disciples who were ranked in the first level. Their strength was at the peak of the 3-star king level, and some of them had even reached the 4-star king level. As for the other 2 spots, some people thought highly of the outstanding disciples in the second level. In addition, Yixing also had a group of people who thought he would enter the top 10. Tu Wanqing was one of the top disciples in the second level. He had already been defeated by Yixing a month ago, and this battle record naturally made many disciples have full confidence in him. However, no one thought of Yixing as the number 1 candidate. Tu Qianzhang, Xing Haoyu, and Gao Jian were the most popular contenders for the number 1 spot. Soon, it was Yixing's turn. His opponent was not weak, and was one of the outstanding disciples in the second level, named Xin Dongyue. Xin Dongyue was a woman who was as cold as ice. White cold air floated around her body. Obviously, her attainments in the water element and ice element were extraordinary. Among the disciples in the second level, Xin Dongyue's fame was even higher than Tu Wanqing's, because the two had fought before. It was before Tu Wanqing went to the Enlightenment Mountain. He had once flirted with Xin Dongyue because of her beauty. As a result, Xin Dongyue was enraged, and the two had fought for almost 100 moves. In the end, Tu Wanqing was defeated by Xin Dongyue. Among the disciples in the second level, there were a few who were most likely to enter the top 10. Tu Wanqing was not one of them, but Xin Dongyue was. On the arena, Xin Dongyue looked at Yixing and said, "You are very young. I can feel your life force. You are younger than all the disciples, and you have not become a king, but you can already defeat Tu Wanqing. Your strength is also shocking. However, it is a pity that your first opponent is me, Xin Dongyue. Under my cold air attack, your strength will be greatly affected, and you will not be able to display your full strength. As time passes, the restrictions on you will become stronger. If you fight with me, you will definitely lose." Yixing smiled indifferently. That may not be the case. Xin Dongyue's expression was as cold as ice, and said, "Then I will use facts to tell you the result. Take this." As soon as her voice fell, a starlight soared into the sky. Xin Dongyue had used her astrology, and it was an extremely cold ice astrology. It increased her cold air greatly, and the entire arena was covered with a layer of frost. A pair of silver-white upper-grade profound weapon gloves instantly appeared on her hands. Whoosh! Xin Dongyue's palm was like 1,000 mountains covered in snow. Countless snowflakes mixed with the cold wind covered the entire arena. Yixing had nowhere to hide. Whoosh! A scarlet starlight soared into the sky. Yixing had used his fire astrology. Yixing did not need to retreat. His fire astrology was at the peak of the extreme astrology. The scorching aura instantly dispersed the cold air. The reason why Zhen Dongyue's palm was so strong was because of the cold air. It could affect the opponent's strength and limit them. When the cold air was dispersed, the power of his palm was reduced by 1 level. Yixing pointed out a finger. His finger was like an arrow, burning with scarlet flames. It gathered the power of the fire astrology and surging fire yuan qi. Its power was shocking, and its speed was extremely fast. As soon as the arrow was released, the palm that had enveloped the entire arena collapsed. Yixing's fingertip appeared in front of Zhen Dongyue in an instant. Zhen Dongyue's expression changed drastically. She had never expected that her cold air would have no effect on Yixing. Yixing's counterattack would be so fierce and fast. As one of the best among the 3-star kings, Zhen Dongyue's reaction was extremely fast. Even though Yixing's finger was out of her expectations, she still instinctively waved her palm to block the finger. Bang! With a crisp sound, the qi that had gathered in Zhen Dongyue's palm was instantly shattered. She felt an intense piercing pain coming from her palm. That sharp aura had actually pierced through her high-grade profound weapon gloves. Zhen Dongyue retracted her palm as if she had been electrocuted. Her body was instantly sent flying out of the arena. Yixing had won his first battle. Even the top disciples of the 2nd level were easily defeated by him. Chapter 775. Zhen Dongyue was already one of the most powerful disciples in the 2nd level. Even Zhen Dongyue wasn't a match for Yixing. In the eyes of the disciples, Yixing's strength was enough to be mentioned in the same breath as the 8 disciples in the 1st level. In fact, this was indeed the case. In the following battles, Yixing swept all the way. Just like the 8 disciples in the 1st level, he won every battle. King-level warriors attacked as fast as lightning. In one breath, they could exchange more than a dozen moves. Unless the opponent's strength was on par with theirs, the battles would end very quickly. 2 hours had passed, and many disciples had already been eliminated because they had lost or tied more than 10 matches. Most of the disciples were also losing. There were only 9 people left who had a perfect record. Apart from the 8 disciples in the 1st level, Yixing was the only one. The 9 people who had a perfect record hadn't fought with each other yet. The battle between them was undoubtedly the battle that the disciples were looking forward to the most. Next battle, Luli versus Yixing. An outer sect deacon's loud and clear voice sounded. The disciples immediately quieted down and became spirited. Yixing raised his eyebrows. There was bound to be a battle between him and Luli. He didn't expect that the first battle between him and the 8 disciples in the 1st level would be Luli. However, Yixing had been waiting for this battle for a long time. Yixing flashed like a stream of light and entered the arena in an instant. At the same time, on the opposite side of the arena, a man in a red robe came up. He was emitting a scorching aura. There seemed to be invisible flames burning on his body, causing the air around him to be distorted. It was Luli. Luli raised his hand and took out a golden fan. It was a Xian weapon of the upper grade. He opened the fan and waved it. Instantly, a hot wind blew up and his black hair flew up. Yixing, it's finally our turn. Are you ready to let all the disciples hear your mournful screams? Luli waved the fan and said to Yixing with a smile. Yixing smiled. He, too, let out a scorching qi and energy. His force of fire at the complete realm began to move. Vast amounts of primordial energy of fire gathered from the void around him. Yixing's power was not inferior to Luli's. Yixing's understanding of the force of fire was higher than Luli's, which made up for the difference in cultivation. The illusory flames burned on Yixing's body, forming translucent waves that were visible to the naked eye. Yixing was like a messenger of fire. He stared at Lu Li and said calmly, You think too highly of yourself. Lu Li's eyes narrowed, revealing a dangerous aura. He chuckled and said, You're the one who thinks too highly of yourself. You're only a 9th star venerable lord. Do you really think you're invincible in the outer sect? Occupying disciples of the 2nd level is your limit. In front of me, Lu Li, there is only defeat for you. Who? With that said, Lu Li used his astrology. A ray of starlight shot up to the sky. An extreme level of fire floated in the sky, pouring down a vast amount of fire star power. Lu Li's fire burned even more fiercely. His chi was like an erupting volcano. Swish, 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 Lu Li waved his saber. With 4 sharp sounds, blades of fire danced in the sky at a speed faster than the speed of sound. They attacked Yixing densely. Lu Li's strength was not ordinary to be ranked in the 1st level. Once he made a move, his aura was vast and mighty. Tu Wanqing, Jin Dongyue, and the other disciples of the 2nd level could not compare to him. Lu Li only used one move. Among the 3-star kings, less than 1 out of 100 could withstand it. Any disciple of the 2nd level would be defeated by this move. However, Yixing was not a disciple of the 2nd level. While Yixing used the force of fire, he also used the force of wind. The wind whistled. The primordial energy of wind surrounded Yixing, forming a huge whirlpool of wind. The wind aided the fire, making it stronger. The fire aided the wind, making the wind stronger. Yixing's astral arrow intent circulated and burst out. Strands of astral energy shot out of his body like dazzling arrows. They contained extreme penetrative power. The power of wind and fire merged into the astral arrows. Countless astral arrows burned with raging flames. They flew around Yixing along with the whirlpool, spreading out in all directions. The flame blades that were attacking Yixing were struck by the astral star arrows, and they were all shattered into pieces. At this moment, Yixing's aura was slightly stronger than Lu Li's. Around the arena, the disciples who were watching the battle were watching intently. Their eyes were filled with shock. Although they had already expected that Yixing's strength had reached the 1st level, Yixing was still only a 9th star venerable lord. In the eyes of these disciples, no matter how strong Yixing was, he could only contend with a disciple of the 1st level. Who would have thought that Yixing's strength would reach such a level? It looked like he was about to suppress Lu Li. It was unbelievable. Lu Li was also shocked by Yixing's strength. He didn't dare to believe that a mere 9th star venerable lord could erupt with such terrifying strength. In the blink of an eye, Yixing had gained the upper hand. Countless astral arrows were launched at Lu Li in retaliation. Fire danced 6 illusions. Lu Li shouted. His figure suddenly flashed and turned into 6 phantoms. The 6 phantoms were as fast as lightning. They attacked Yixing from different directions. Lu Li was proficient in the way of fire. This move, 6 illusions dance of fire, was something he had comprehended from the way of fire. It was extremely mysterious. Once it was executed, only 1 in 10,000 people of the same realm could withstand it. However, in terms of speed, Yixing didn't fear any low-level king. Even among mid-level kings, it was difficult to compare with Yixing. In an instant, Yixing withdrew the astral arrows. Arrow intent attached to his body. Using his body as an arrow, he changed his position 6 times in an instant as if he had teleported. In an instant, the 6 phantoms' attacks all missed. How was this possible? Lu Li was shocked. His fire dance 6 illusions wasn't just an illusion. Although only one of the 6 phantoms was real, the other 5 weren't completely illusory. Instead, they had powerful offensive power. Therefore, as long as one of the 6 phantoms' attacks hit, it could severely injure the opponent. Ever since Lu Li comprehended the fire dance 6 illusions, he had never met a king of the same realm who could completely avoid it, let alone a warrior with a lower cultivation. On the other hand, Yi Xing was only a 9th-star venerable lord. He wasn't even a king, and his cultivation was much lower than Lu Li's. Yet, he was able to completely dodge the 6 illusions. How could Lu Li not be shocked? Man and fan as one, cut! Lu Li shouted angrily. The 6 phantoms merged into one, and their strength erupted to the limit. The fan slashed out, and the fiery blade slashed down like a heavenly blade. In any case, the arena was only so big. When Lu Li used his full strength, his attack range covered the entire arena. No matter how amazing the movement technique was, it couldn't avoid his attack. Therefore, Lu Li threw away all restraints and used his full strength to attack with the strongest attack. Chapter 778. He's too powerful. Senior brother Gao Jian comprehended sword intent, but he's still no match for senior brother Zheng Haoyu. It seems like the first place of this competition will be senior brother Zheng Haoyu. Senior brother Gao Jian comprehended sword intent, so his strength should be at the level of a 4-star king. Senior brother Zheng Haoyu is even stronger than senior brother Gao Jian. I'm afraid he's an expert among 4-star kings. Senior brother Zheng Haoyu is indeed powerful, but senior brother Tu Qianzhang's strength is also unfathomable. He has also defeated 2 senior brothers of the 1st level. I'm afraid he's not any weaker than senior brother Zheng Haoyu. Senior brother Gao Jian comprehended sword intent and has the strength to fight for 1st place. Senior brother Zheng Haoyu defeated senior brother Gao Jian, but it's different from senior brother Tu Qianzhang who defeated senior sister Yu Feifei and senior brother Zhen Zihan. Indeed. If senior brother Zheng Haoyu really wants to take 1st place, even if there's a variable, this variable will only happen to senior brother Tu Qianzhang. Around the arena, the disciples were whispering. After Zheng Haoyu defeated Gao Jian, his popularity soared. Most of the disciples believed that Zheng Haoyu would definitely take 1st place. However, there were still some disciples who believed that Tu Qianzhang's strength might not be below Zheng Haoyu's. Without fighting, the outcome couldn't be determined. They believed that Tu Qianzhang still had a chance to take 1st place. Although Yi Xing was also listed as a strong contender for 1st place, Zheng Haoyu's defeat of Gao Jian had obviously raised the level of strength. Therefore, Yi Xing was instinctively excluded from the top contenders. After all, Yi Xing was only a 9-star venerable lord. His cultivation was too low. The reason why he caused such a commotion wasn't because his strength had reached the level of Zheng Haoyu and Tu Qianzhang. It was because his strength was relatively shocking compared to his cultivation. However, the battle for 1st place wasn't about strength and cultivation, but about one's true strength. Even if one had potential, even if one had great achievements in the future, that was still the future. Right now, Yi Xing was naturally ignored by the disciples. The battles continued, and the more disciples were eliminated. The chances of the 1st-level disciples fighting each other also increased. Every few rounds, there would be a fight. After Yi Xing defeated Lu Li, the 2nd disciple he met at the 1st level was Zhen Zihan. Yi Xing was a swordsman, but his strength was not very outstanding. Among the kings of the same realm, he could only be considered to be in the front. He was far from the peak level. Compared to Lu Li, who was practically invincible among the 3-star kings, there was still a gap between him and Yi Xing. Naturally, he was not Yi Xing's opponent. Next match, Yi Xing vs Sun Gang. After defeating Zhen Zihan, not long after, it was Yi Xing's turn to go on stage. This time, his opponent was much stronger. After Sun Gang defeated Yu Feifei, he ran into Lu Li. They exchanged dozens of moves before Sun Gang won. Sun Gang was not only strong, but also had a strong defense. Lu Li's attack power was slightly better than Sun Gang's, so he had the upper hand in the beginning. Although his fire blade hit Sun Gang twice, it didn't hurt him. After dozens of moves, Lu Li was only hit once by Sun Gang. He spat out blood and was knocked off the ring. It could be seen that Sun Gang was not easy to deal with. The stronger Sun Gang was, the stronger Zheng Haoyu was. Sun Gang's physique was strong. He was 2 meters tall with well-developed muscles. He was full of explosive power, like an iron tower. He carried a pitch-black iron rod on his shoulder. It was incomparably heavy, weighing more than 10,000 pounds. In front of Sun Gang, Yixing, who was 1.8 meters tall, seemed a little short. Sun Gang looked down at Yixing, grinned, and said in a muffled voice, "Yixing, I saw your battle with Lu Li. I was surprised that you could beat him. But this time, I won't be surprised again. Your attack can't hurt me at all. In front of me, you will lose without a doubt." Yixing looked at Sun Gang and smiled. "I also saw your battle with Lu Li. He almost broke your defense. It can be seen that your defense is not as strong as you think. If I want to hurt you, it will be easy." Ha 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 ha. Sun Gang laughed loudly. He stomped the heavy iron rod on the ground and said, "You think it's easy to injure me? I'm standing right here. Come and try. See if you can hurt me." As he spoke, a ray of starlight shot into the sky and turned into a bluestone star. It was an extreme earth element astrology. Stone to earth was like ice to water. In terms of defense, the petrified earth element astrology was better than the normal earth element astrology. At the same time, Sun Gang circulated his astral energy, and a layer of stony defensive layer instantly appeared on the surface of his body. The defensive effect was even better than that of a high-grade profound-grade inner armor. Without the attacking power of a mid-step king, it would be impossible to break through this layer of stony defense. Sun Gang patted his chest loudly and laughed loudly. "Come on. Didn't you say you can hurt me easily? Come on." All the disciples' eyes were focused on Yixing. Yixing's strength was indeed shocking. However, Sun Gang's defense was as strong as a wall. Lu Li's attack power was strong enough. It was the limit of a 3-star king, but it couldn't break Sun Gang's defense. Even if Yixing's attack power was stronger than Lu Li's, in the eyes of the disciples, it wouldn't be much stronger. It would be difficult for him to hurt Sun Gang. On the other side of the stage, Yixing looked at Sun Gang, who was patting his chest, and a trace of a smile appeared on his face. He immediately used the fire astrology. At the same time, the arrow intent and astral energy were activated. Yixing's aura burst out in an instant. However, in Sun Gang's eyes, in the eyes of the disciples, it was still not enough. Yixing had used all these methods before. However, with the attack power that Yixing had shown, he couldn't break Sun Gang's defense. Sun Gang laughed and said, "Is that it? Yixing, with your current performance, you still have a long way to go if you want to hurt me." Yixing raised his hand and a bow that seemed to be burning with red flames appeared in his hand. It was a high-grade Xian bow, red flame bow. With the bow in hand, Yixing's aura changed in an instant. Its sharpness increased by more than 10 times. Ever since Yixing comprehended the arrow intent, the astral energy in his body changed. He could use his body as a bow and astral energy as an arrow. He had never directly used a bow to fight an enemy. However, the arrow intent and the archer were the best combination. It was like a swordsman who comprehended the sword intent. Only by using a sword could he display the greatest power. The arrow intent also needed a bow and arrow to fully display its brilliance. With the red flame bow in hand, Yixing instantly drew the bow. The astral energy on the bowstring condensed into an arrow. The sharpness was 10 times stronger than the astral energy directly condensed into an arrow. Although the strength of the arrow remained the same, its penetrative power and destructive power had greatly increased. What kind of defense could withstand this arrow? Chapter 779. The smile on Sun Gang's face froze the moment the arrow locked onto him. His eyes were filled with shock and fear. Yixing's arrow was too powerful, causing him to feel an instinctive fear. The more powerful a martial artist was, the more confident he would be, and the more sensitive his senses would be. He would naturally be able to sense attacks that were difficult to block. At this moment, Sun Gang felt that it was difficult to block Yixing's arrow. It was as if he would be severely injured as soon as Yixing shot the arrow. No. Impossible. Sun Gang got rid of the fear in his heart and strengthened his confidence. He's only a 9th star supremacy. No matter how strong he is, there's a limit to his strength. He can't hurt me. Impossible. Sun Gang used all his strength to activate the astral energy and the power of his astrology to the maximum. The stone defense on the surface of his body emitted a green glow and seemed to be flowing with light. He held the black iron staff tightly with both hands and was on high alert. He was ready to shoot down Yixing's arrow at any time. Whoosh! Suddenly, the arrow in Yixing's hand left the bowstring and shot out explosively. Even though the disciples had fixed their eyes on Yixing without blinking, they only saw a flash of light and lost track of the arrow. The speed of this arrow was too fast. When the arrow's speed reached a certain level, it could break through the void. The air was the only resistance. Therefore, when the arrow's penetrating power was strong enough and its aura was sharp enough, the speed at which it pierced through the air would be greatly increased. With the arrow intent, Yixing's arrow's penetrating power increased by more than 10 times. The arrow's speed was naturally extremely fast, almost surpassing the passage of time. Among the disciples of the 10th peak, the number of people who could barely see the trajectory of Yixing's arrow could not be counted on one hand. Although Sun Gang's defense was strong, his reaction was not top-notch, so he was not included. When the arrow left the bowstring and the light flashed, Sun Gang knew that he could not block the arrow. The only way to deal with it was to dodge. Although Yixing's arrow was extremely fast, he was still confident that he could dodge it if he moved within a small area. However, just as Sun Gang thought of dodging, he was shocked to discover that the space around him had become viscous. The air was like a stream of water, creating a great resistance. How fast was Yixing's arrow? It happened in an instant. There wasn't even the passage of time. Sun Gang's body moved. Originally, he was going to change his position in an instant, but the air resistance caused his speed to slow down for a moment. Although it was less than a tenth of a blink of an eye, it was more than enough time for Yixing to shoot an arrow. The astral arrow struck Sun Gang's body from an unexpected angle. That layer of stone defense was instantly penetrated by the arrow. The sharp arrow pierced through Sun Gang's stone defense, piercing through his inner armor and cutting into his body. The intense pain caused Sun Gang to cry out in pain. His body involuntarily flew backwards and fell onto the arena. Hiss! All the disciples sucked in a breath of cold air. The result of this battle was once again out of their expectations. No one had thought that Yixing would be able to defeat Sun Gang in a single move. The fearsomeness of that arrow struck fear into the hearts of all the disciples. Yixing wins, 1 point added. Sun Gang loses, 1 point deducted. Yixing continued to maintain his winning streak, ending Sun Gang's winning streak. At this point, only Yixing, Zheng Haoyu, and Tu Qianzhang had a winning streak. The latter two were the hot candidates for first place. However, Yixing's defeat of Sun Gang gave some disciples a thought. Perhaps Yixing was also in the competition for first place. Of course, this was just a thought. If they wanted to be sure, they had to at least cross the mountain known as Gao Jian. Although Gao Jian did not maintain a winning streak, he was one of the initial candidates for first place. There was no doubt about his strength. Yixing's qualification to compete for first place had to be tested by Gao Jian. If he could defeat Gao Jian, then he definitely had the strength to compete for first place. If he could not defeat Gao Jian, then competing for first place would be completely meaningless. Yixing and Sun Gang's battle did not last long. Soon, it was the turn of the first-level disciples. This time, it was Tu Qianzhang against Gao Jian. This would be yet another battle between the pinnacle. Not only that, Tu Qianzhang was the same as Yixing, he would also have to face Gao Jian. Although Tu Qianzhang was powerful and famous, no one dared to say that Tu Qianzhang could win against Gao Jian. Like Yixing, Tu Qianzhang would only be qualified to compete with Zheng Haoyu for first place if he defeated Gao Jian. If he lost to Gao Jian, then he would have no chance at first place. In the arena, Gao Jian and Tu Qianzhang stood facing each other. Gao Jian's sword aura was surging and extremely sharp. It contained the aura of sword intent that swept across the area. In the previous battle between Zheng Haoyu and Gao Jian, Zheng Haoyu was suppressed by Gao Jian's sword aura. It could be seen how strong Gao Jian's sword aura was. Ha ha ha. Tu Qianzhang laughed in the face of Gao Jian's sword aura suppression. He did not care. With his laughter, an illusory saber shadow appeared above his head. A terrifying aura that could cut off heaven and earth instantly erupted. Tu Qianzhang smiled and said, "Martial intent, I also have. Saber intent. It's saber intent." Senior brother Tu Qianzhang actually comprehended saber intent at Enlightenment Mountain. My God, senior brother Tu Qianzhang's strength is very powerful. He could compete with Gao Jian. Now that he has comprehended saber intent, how can Gao Jian be his opponent? The disciples suddenly exclaimed, their voices shaking. At this time, the battle had already begun. As soon as Tu Qianzhang's voice fell, he used astrology, took out a high-grade black saber, and slashed out. The attack was swift and fierce, shrouding the entire arena. Tu Qianzhang's saber technique was originally overbearing. Now that it contained saber intent, its power was on another level. He attacked Gao Jian fiercely, one saber strike after another. Even though Gao Jian had comprehended sword intent and his sword moves were as powerful as thunder, he was still suppressed by Tu Qianzhang's saber technique. In the 12th saber strike, Gao Jian could not withstand it. He was sent flying by Tu Qianzhang's saber and lost the battle. Tu Qianzhang withdrew his astrology, saber, and aura. However, his black hair was flying, and there was still a kind of overbearing momentum. His eyes revealed arrogance. First, he glanced at Zheng Haoyu to show that he was not afraid of Zheng Haoyu. Then, he looked at Yixing with a trace of ruthlessness. Yixing felt the words in Tu Qianzhang's eyes, "Boy, I'll wait for you." Yixing's expression was as usual. He did not feel any pressure against Tu Qianzhang. If he entered the top 10, he would be qualified to go to the Heavenly Bao continent. Yixing's goal had been achieved. As for the final ranking, he would try his best, but he did not care. Yixing was certain to enter the top 10. No matter how powerful Tu Qianzhang was, he could not shake his mind. Chapter 780. In this battle, Tu Qianzhang's strength was beyond the disciples' expectations. Before this, Zheng Haoyu was the most popular candidate for first place, but after this battle, Tu Qianzhang's voice also rose, and he was on par with Zheng Haoyu. Zheng Haoyu and Tu Qianzhang's fame attracted the disciples' attention. Naturally, Yixing was ignored. Few people would compare Yi Xing with Zheng Haoyu and Tu Qianzhang in the battle for first place. The competition continued. More and more disciples were eliminated. Yi Xing went through a few more battles, and his opponents were defeated one by one. Among them was Yu Feifei, who was in the first place. Next battle, Gao Jian vs Yi Xing. After a few battles without any suspense, Yi Xing was once again facing a heavyweight opponent. The disciples' spirits were also lifted. The battle between Yi Xing and Gao Jian was very important. Gao Jian's strength was undoubtedly strong. Whether it was Zheng Haoyu or Tu Qianzhang, they both used more than 10 moves to defeat Gao Jian. If Yi Xing could defeat Gao Jian, he would be on par with Zheng Haoyu and Tu Qianzhang. Of course, this referred to the situation where he could defeat Gao Jian quickly. If the two fought fiercely for more than 100 moves, Yi Xing would naturally not be on par with Zheng Haoyu and Tu Qianzhang, who defeated Gao Jian in less than 10 moves. In the arena, Yi Xing held the crimson flame bow in his hand, and there was an illusory flame burning on his body. He was like a flame emissary, and his momentum was wild and hot. Gao Jian's white robe fluttered, and his sword momentum soared to the sky. Lightning swam around his body, and the void crackled. Gao Jian's sword momentum was strong, but it did not affect Yi Xing's half of the arena. Yi Xing's arrow was unexpectedly released, and there seemed to be an invisible barrier blocking the suppression of the sword intent. Yi Xing said, "Senior brother Gao Jian, I have to thank you." Gao Jian naturally understood what Yi Xing was talking about. He smiled calmly and said, "I'm just following my heart. There's no need to thank me." Pausing for a moment, Gao Jian said, "Don't purposely give in to me because of this. If you respect me, then attack with all your strength. Even if I lose, I'll be satisfied. If you purposely give in, then it'll be a disgrace for me to win this battle." Yi Xing nodded and said, "I'll do my best. Senior Martial Brother Gao Jian, take this." As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xing had already drawn his scarlet flame bow. His originally violent aura was now 10 times stronger than before, and an astral arrow was quickly formed. Boom! Gao Jian did not give Yi Xing the chance to successfully condense the arrow. He swung his sword, and the sound of thunder exploded. The sword force was like a thunder dragon that instantly attacked. Technique of the 9 heavens astral travel. Yi Xing attached himself to the arrow will and displayed the lightness skill of the perfection of martial arts. His body flickered like a stream of light and instantly changed his position. The thunder dragon sword force missed. Gao Jian reacted quickly and swept his sword. The moment Yi Xing appeared, the thunder dragon sword force had already pounced on him. The astral arrow had not been completely formed, but Yi Xing had no choice but to deal with this sword. The unformed astral arrow turned into a black flame ripple and shot out. The black flame ripple contained an extremely sharp aura. It cut the thunder dragon sword force in half, and the arrow itself was instantly shattered. 3 thunderbolt swords. Gao Jian roared and leaped up. In an instant, he swung his sword 3 times. The sword was swept in all directions, and the sound of thunder exploded. The entire arena was shaking. 3 streaks of sword force fell from the sky. Each of the streaks of sword force had the power of thunder. The 3 thunderbolt swords enveloped the entire arena, and there was no way to avoid it. Yi Xing stood in his original position and drew a circle with the scarlet flame bow in his hand. Darkness devour. The wind, fire, and darkness primordial chi gathered and formed a black flame vortex. It contained an extremely powerful arrow that could tear everything apart. The black flame vortex had a terrifying devouring power. It sucked in the 3 streaks of sword force and crushed them into pieces. Gao Jian was stunned. Yi Xing actually had such a unique bow weapon. It was out of his expectations. At this moment, Yi Xing took a step forward. The arrow will pierce through the air and appeared in front of Gao Jian as if he had teleported. The scarlet flame bow carried the terrifying power of fire as it shot out. Thousand fire thunder. Rumble, the violent flames exploded and let out a thunderous explosion. Its power was terrifying. The fire astral aspect, fire force, and fire primordial chi worked together perfectly at this moment. They exploded and the shadow of the bow was about to shatter the sky. The speed of this attack was too fast. Even though Gao Jian had comprehended the sword will, he still felt flustered. He quickly sealed his sword to defend himself. Bang! The terrifying power collided and Gao Jian felt his arm go numb. Yixing took advantage of the situation and continued to move forward. He continued to use the fire bow weapon. Every attack had a terrifying explosion of flames and a thunderous explosion. Gao Jian unleashed his strength to the limit and quickly defended himself. However, he could not reverse the situation and was forced to retreat. In just a dozen moves, Gao Jian was forced to the edge of the arena. Under Yixing's suppression, he had no choice but to retreat from the arena and lose this battle. Yixing wins, points increase by 1. Gao Jian loses, points decrease by 1. The outer court deacon who presided over the competition immediately announced the result. Yixing continued to maintain his winning streak. Like Zheng Haoyu and Tu Qianzhang, he defeated Gao Jian. Yixing really won. Yixing defeated senior brother Gao Jian. It seems that Yixing also has a chance to fight for first place. If a 9th-star Venerable Lord takes first place, my God. I can't imagine the result. Yixing defeated senior brother Gao Jian in just a dozen moves. He does indeed have the strength to fight for first place. It's different. Senior brother Gao Jian was defeated by senior brother Zheng Haoyu and senior brother Tu Qianzhang and was injured. However, he was able to retreat unscathed against Yixing. It can be seen that there is still a gap between Yixing and the two senior brothers. He won't be in the first round. What if senior brother Gao Jian retreated unscathed because Yixing deliberately went easy on him? How is that possible? Senior brother Gao Jian is so strong. Could it be that he held back when fighting with senior brother Gao Jian? Impossible. Below the arena, the disciples discussed animatedly. Yixing defeated Gao Jian and displayed his strength. Many disciples included him in the list of contenders for first place. However, there were still many disciples who did not think that Yixing was a match for Zheng Haoyu and Tu Qianzhang. They thought that the first place would only appear between the two of them. Yixing did not care about the opinions of the disciples. He did not care whether he was in first place or not. The key was that if he fought with Tu Qianzhang, he would definitely go all out. Tu Qianzhang would definitely try to injure him in the duel because of Tu Wanqing. Yixing would definitely not let him succeed. Instead, he would counterattack. The duel continued. After a dozen more battles, more disciples were eliminated. The duel was nearing its end. Currently, only Yixing, Tu Qianzhang, and Zheng Haoyu were still undefeated. The disciples were looking forward to the duels between the three of them. Not letting down the expectations of the disciples, it didn't take long for a battle between the three of them to begin. Next duel, Zheng Haoyu vs Tu Qianzhang. Chapter 783. The result of the match between Yixing and Zheng Haoyu exceeded the disciples' expectations. Only with true battle results could one gain fame. As a 9-star supremacy, Yixing was looked down on by the disciples in terms of cultivation. However, after the many battles, his fame gradually rose. Now, Xiao Chen's defeat of Zheng Haoyu shocked everyone. His fame soared, catching up to Tu Qianzhang. No disciple dared to say that Yixing was not qualified to fight for the first rank anymore. However, the disciples still believed that Tu Qianzhang had the upper hand in the match between Yixing and Tu Qianzhang. His chances of victory were higher. However, all the disciples had to admit that Yixing was already a strong contender for the first rank. It was not impossible for him to obtain the first rank. After a dozen more battles, there was only one last battle left in the grand competition. Next battle, Yixing versus Tu Qianzhang. All the disciples had been waiting for this battle. When they heard this, they felt energized. These two disciples, who had maintained a clean record, were finally going to fight. The result of this battle would determine who would obtain the first rank in this competition. Whoosh! Whoosh! Yixing and Tu Qianzhang's figures appeared on the arena at the same time. Senior brother Tu will win. Senior brother Tu will win. Tu Qianzhang had many supporters. Many disciples below the arena cheered, their voices sounding like they could topple mountains and overturn seas. The battle for the first rank was the most important in every new disciple competition. Mo Qingyang, Elder Zhao Yuan, and Elder Wu Mingtong, who were watching from afar, did not stop the disciples from cheering. Although they were far away, quasi-gods had very strong eyesight. Everything in the plaza at the foot of the mountain was clearly visible. Mo Qingyang looked at Yixing and Tu Qianzhang on the arena. Then, he looked at the two quasi-gods at the side and said, "Junior brothers, who do you think will obtain the first rank?" Yixing. Tu Qianzhang. Zhao Yuan and Wu Mingtong spoke at the same time, but they said different names. Mo Qingyang looked at Zhao Yuan and asked, "Junior brother Zhao, how do you know it's Yixing?" Zhao Yuan smiled faintly and said, "Throughout this competition, Yixing's strength has increased along with the strength of his opponents. It seems to be bottomless, and can always surprise others. I believe that this time, he will surprise me again, and..." Zhao Yuan paused for a moment before continuing, "He's only a 9th star Venerable Lord, but his strength has reached the level of a 4-star Venerable Lord. His ability to challenge those at a higher level is truly heaven-defying. In the past 10,000 years, only the Palace Master, the Divine Emperor, had such heaven-defying battle prowess when he was a 9th star Venerable Lord. Such a heaven-defying monster will definitely stir up a storm in the future." When the Palace Master Divine Emperor was mentioned, Mo Qingyang and Wu Mingtong revealed a respectful expression. After Zhao Yuan finished speaking, Wu Mingtong chuckled and said, "What kind of person is the Palace Master Divine Emperor? It's really inappropriate for junior brother Zhao to compare an outer disciple with him. The gap between them is as vast as the ocean. How can they be compared? The Palace Master Divine Emperor is a true god, while Yixing comes from the most ordinary medium continent. Having a quasi-god's fate of 1 or 2 stars is the limit of the limit. They are not on the same level." Zhao Yuan said, "I'm only saying that Yixing's strength when he was a 9th star Venerable Lord is comparable to the Palace Master Divine Emperor when he was a 9th star Venerable Lord. Senior brother Wu, don't misunderstand." The Palace Master Divine Emperor referred to the Palace Master of the Dark Star Divine Palace. At the same time, he was also the Divine Emperor of the Dark Star Divine Kingdom. Only the strongest among true gods could be respectfully addressed as Divine Emperors. The Palace Master of the Dark Star Divine Palace was the strongest among the true gods. Not only was he the #1 expert in the Dark Star Divine Palace, but he was also one of the top existences in the entire flowing light boundary. Both the elders and disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace were very respectful towards this Palace Master Divine Emperor. Mo Qingyang looked at Wu Mingtong and said, "Junior brother Wu, why do you think it's Tu Qianzhang?" Wu Mingtong said, "With senior brother Mo's eyesight, you must be able to see the difference in strength between the two. The gap is very small. Tu Qianzhang is a bit stronger, but it's very limited. With Yixing's attainments in archery, if they fought in the wilderness, there would be enough space for him to move freely. Tu Qianzhang would definitely not be his opponent." But on the stage, the battle range is limited. Yi Xing would definitely not be Tu Qianzhang's opponent. I think he would be able to last 20 moves against Tu Qianzhang at most. Mo Qingyang pondered for a moment and said, "You're right. However, what if Yi Xing still has a trump card?" Wu Mingtong said, "What kind of trump card could he have that even our divine eyes can't see through?" Astral-reaching venerables could open the martial Dao heavenly eye. After becoming a quasi-god, the heavenly eye would evolve into a divine eye. Not only would the eyesight increase by 100 times, it would also have all kinds of benefits. Mo Qingyang nodded, agreeing with Wu Mingtong's words. On the side, Zhao Yuan raised a contrary opinion, a 9-star venerable lord with a 4-star king's battle strength. Such a heaven-defying monster is rare. Could he really be as simple as we think? I feel that I can't see through him. Even true god experts aren't omnipotent. It should be normal for a quasi-god to be unable to see through a monstrous genius with great fortune. Mo Qingyang nodded, junior brother Zhao's words make sense. Let's wait and see. The result will be clear soon. On the stage, Yi Xing and Tu Qianzhang had already started fighting after a few unpleasant words. Blood Cloud Saber Arts. Tu Qianzhang's extreme metal constellation had merged his saber intent into his saber aura. It was incomparably sharp, and its offensive power was shocking. The blood-colored saber danced in his hand. Every saber strike contained a golden light mixed with a blood-colored radiance. It was like a huge wave in the sea or a dense cloud covering the sky. Yi Xing held the scarlet flame bow and used the extreme fire star constellation. He executed the dark wind fire arrow art. Using the bow as a weapon, he drew out many dark vortexes, neutralizing Tu Qianzhang's attacks one after another. However, Tu Qianzhang's attacks were swift and fierce. They were even more powerful than Jing Haoyu's fiendish wind 18 spears. When the blood-colored saber chopped down, the golden radiance mixed with a blood-red radiance was overwhelming. Yi Xing's dark vortexes continuously neutralized his opponent's moves. However, he felt great pressure. After just a dozen moves, the dark vortexes could no longer be maintained and started to collapse. This martial technique of yours can neutralize other people's moves. It is indeed very special. Unfortunately, this move is not strong enough. Its neutralization ability is limited. Ha! Tu Qianzhang laughed heartily. He was in a very good mood. Prepare to receive the pain I will bring you, blood cloud covering the sky. As Tu Qianzhang roared, the blood-colored saber in his hand slashed out again and again. Rays of golden saber aura mixed with red blotted out the sky as they chopped down on Yi Xing, enveloping the entire stage. This move was unavoidable. Yi Xing operated the astral arrow intent to the limit. He used 3 kinds of worldly momentum at the same time. However, he still could not prevent the dark vortexes from collapsing. The saber aura was too dense. The arena was limited. Yi Xing could not avoid it. Facing this move, Yi Xing was almost in a desperate situation. Chapter 784. Yi Xing's about to lose. This is the 15th move. It looks like I was overestimating him when I said he'd last 20 moves at most. In the distance, quasi-god Wu Mingtong casually said. On the side, quasi-god Zhao Yuan ignored Wu Mingtong. Instead, he opened his divine eye and locked onto Yi Xing. He had a feeling that Yi Xing wasn't as simple as he seemed. He was certain that Yi Xing wouldn't lose so easily. He had to have other tricks up his sleeve. Yi Xing did have other trump cards, the black hole astrology and Sagittarius astrology. However, Yi Xing didn't plan to use them in the match. Exposing one's entire strength under the gazes of everyone on the arena was undoubtedly an unwise action. Moreover, the higher Yi Xing's cultivation, the more he realized how rare paramount astrology was. It was best to use it sparingly unless it was a matter of life and death. Besides, Yi Xing didn't have to use the black hole astrology or Sagittarius astrology. There were other ways to deal with Tu Qianzhang. Yi Xing's forehead split open as he activated his martial Dao celestial eye. At the same time, he activated his superbrain scanning function. Although Tu Qianzhang's blood cloud blotting the sky was dense and powerful, it wasn't without weaknesses. The attack was most powerful when it was focused on a single point. This move's power would be divided into different areas, but Yi Xing wouldn't have noticed it under normal circumstances. Now that he activated his martial Dao celestial eye and his superbrain scanned the area, Yi Xing saw everything in front of him. A vision model appeared in his mind. Everything in front of him, even the slightest wisp of air, was clearly scanned by the superbrain. In an instant, Yi Xing discovered the weakness of Tu Qianzhang's move. There were several spots where the attack power was very weak. Although these spots weren't large and didn't have anything special in the air of blades, they couldn't escape the superbrain scanning. Thunderclap of myriad flames. Yi Xing had already prepared this attack, and he aimed it at the weakest point of the astral saber. The shadow of a flaming bow instantly shot out, and the terrifying power of flames exploded like thunder. Boom! Wherever the shadow of the flaming bow passed, the void shattered, and the saber aura in the area was instantly pulverized. Whoosh! Yi Xing's figure was like a small fish in a large net. He passed through the dense net of saber auras and rushed out through the gap created by the flaming bow. Bowstring wind slash. Yi Xing's arrow was attached to his body, and he was as fast as teleportation. As soon as he broke through the net of sabers, he appeared in front of Tu Qianzhang in an instant. The crimson flame bow in his hand swept out horizontally. The momentum of the wind and the arrow intent were displayed to the limit. The bowstring cut horizontally like a knife, cutting the void into two like a mirror. The bowstring of the crimson flame bow slashed at Tu Qianzhang's neck. If this attack succeeded, Tu Qianzhang's head would be chopped off. It took a long time to describe, but in reality, it happened in the blink of an eye. The two exchanged offense and defense, and Yi Xing completed the transition from defense to offense in an instant. In the distance, quasi-god Wu Mingtong's smile that seemed to have seen through everything froze on his face. The change in the battle situation was beyond his expectations. As for quasi-god Zhao Yuan, he revealed an expression as if he had expected this. He had long since guessed that Yi Xing still had a backup plan and wouldn't be defeated so easily. All of this was within his expectations. Zhao Yuan possessed the martial path divine eye, and his eyesight was extremely powerful. He was naturally able to see the strengths and weaknesses of Tu Qianzhang's moves. He also understood that Yi Xing's counterattack just now was because he had found the weakness of Tu Qianzhang's moves. However, he was still very puzzled. He didn't know how Yi Xing had found the weakness of Tu Qianzhang's moves. It was extremely difficult to see the weakness of another's moves. Unless one's strength far surpassed one's, it would be relatively easy to see the weakness in two different worlds. For instance, there was a huge gap between a king and a quasi-god. A quasi-god could clearly see everything in a king's attack. However, even if they were both kings, even if one side was a powerful peerless emperor and the other was only an initial king, the former would still find it extremely difficult to see everything in the latter's attack. Yi Xing's counterattack was beyond Tu Qianzhang's expectations. However, Tu Qianzhang's reaction speed was also extremely fast. As soon as Yi Xing rushed out of blood cloud obscuring the heavens, Tu Qianzhang decisively changed his position. Even though Yi Xing's attack was as fast as teleportation, no matter how fast he teleported, time did not stop or reverse. Tu Qianzhang had been prepared in advance, so Yi Xing's attack naturally missed. Yi Xing's martial path heavenly eye had the ability to scan the superbrain. It was much stronger than the heavenly eyes of other martial artists. Tu Qianzhang's movements were indeed extremely fast, but they couldn't escape Yixing's eyes. Whoosh! After Yixing's attack failed, his next attack was like teleportation. His scarlet flame bow was like a blade, slashing horizontally at Tu Qianzhang. Yixing's attack was too fast. Moreover, the angle and timing of his attack were flawless. Tu Qianzhang couldn't react in time and could only retreat once more. Whoosh 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 whoosh, Yixing used speed to attack speed. His bowstring slashed horizontally like a blade, rapidly attacking Tu Qianzhang. This extreme speed gave Tu Qianzhang no time to prepare. He was also caught unprepared and constantly retreated. If Yixing continued to attack like this and Tu Qianzhang didn't have any other methods to deal with it, he could completely suppress Tu Qianzhang until he was blasted off the stage. Against Gao Jian and Jing Haoyu, Yixing would use this method. However, against Tu Qianzhang, he wouldn't. If Tu Qianzhang had the upper hand, he definitely wouldn't end this battle so easily. Instead, he would find an opportunity to heavily injure Yixing. Now that Yixing had the upper hand, he didn't want Tu Qianzhang to safely retreat. After a certain move, Yixing suddenly drew back, no longer continuing to attack Tu Qianzhang. Just as he was about to be forced off the stage by Yixing, Yixing suddenly drew back and stopped his attack. Tu Qianzhang was surprised at first, but then he was overjoyed. Just as Tu Qianzhang's joy reached its peak and he was preparing to counterattack Yixing, he suddenly felt a terrifying sense of danger. He saw that Yixing, who had retreated to the other side of the stage, had already drawn back his scarlet flame bow. An astral arrow condensed. When the arrow was combined with the arrow, the sharp momentum that broke through the vault of heaven was unstoppable and daunting. Tu Qianzhang's complexion changed. He was about to face the strongest attack he had faced since his battle with Yixing. Whoosh, just as this thought appeared in Tu Qianzhang's mind, Yixing's arrow had already left the bowstring and shot out explosively. The arrow released by the Black Shadow Wind Fire art contained the 3 yuan qis of darkness, wind, and fire. It was also strengthened by the arrow intent, causing its penetrative power and destructive power to increase greatly. Even for a 4-star king, this arrow could be said to be terrifying. Most importantly, the arrow's speed was so fast that it ignored the passage of time. At this moment, Tu Qianzhang felt as if time had stopped. The surrounding space was as viscous as water, making it impossible for him to dodge at his fastest speed. However, the black flame arrow was like a flash of light, shooting in front of him. Tu Qianzhang wanted to dodge, but he couldn't react in time. The arrow hit his body. Puffed, spitting out a large mouthful of blood, Tu Qianzhang was instantly sent flying by the arrow and fell off the stage. In the final battle, Yixing won. He became the only disciple who had won all the battles in the 10th Peak's New Disciple competition. The first place belonged to Yixing. Chapter 786. Mo Qingyang said, "The star's secret realm has existed for a long time. Even a true god expert can't break the seal inside. It's obvious that it's a treasure left behind by a supreme being." Mo Qingyang paused when he said this. Supreme martial artist, the true pinnacle of martial arts. When Yixing and the others heard this, their hearts skipped a beat. They were somewhat excited. It's hard to imagine how rich and precious the treasures left behind by a supreme martial artist are. However, no one has ever been able to obtain all the treasures in the star's secret realm. Luo Tiangong is the one who has obtained the most treasures in the star's secret realm. However, after Luo Tiangong died, he didn't leave his harvest to the world. Instead, he hid it in a starry continent and was buried there as well. That's the Heavenly Bao continent. Luo Tiangong sealed the entire Heavenly Bao continent. Even a true god expert can't enter. If they forcefully enter and break the seal, the entire Heavenly Bao continent will be destroyed. However, Luo Tiangong didn't go to the extreme. He left 3 entrances that only intermediate kings and below can pass through. These 3 entrances are connected to the 3 high-class continents of the flowing light world. There's one entrance in the Dark Star continent. The other 2 entrances are in the Star River continent and the Radiance continent. Peak Master, are there 5-star sects in the other 2 high-class continents? Someone asked. Mo Qingyang nodded and said, the Star River Divine Palace and the Radiance Divine Palace are forces that are on par with the Dark Star Divine Palace. Every 100 years, the 3 entrances to the Heavenly Bao continent will open. Therefore, it's not only the outer disciples of the Dark Star Divine Palace who will enter. The elite outer disciples of the Star River Divine Palace and the Radiance Divine Palace will also enter to explore. To be able to rank in the top 10 of the 10th peak, the disciples present were the elites of the elites. In the 10th peak, they were already at the peak. Naturally, they were looking forward to seeing the elite outer disciples of the other sections. Mo Qingyang could see the anticipation on everyone's face. He said, the relationship between the 3 divine palaces isn't very harmonious. If you meet in the Heavenly Bao continent, it's normal to have a life and death battle. If you meet the disciples of the other 2 divine palaces, you must be careful. In the past 20,000 years, the 3 5-star powerhouses of the flowing light world had already sent their outer disciples into the Heavenly Bao continent about 200 times. Some of them had obtained Xian-grade treasures, while others had obtained God-grade treasures. However, these were only the lucky few, as most of them had entered the Heavenly Bao continent with nothing. Furthermore, as time passed, the number of treasures obtained from the Heavenly Bao continent decreased. That meant that the Heavenly Bao continent was almost fully explored. However, no one had discovered Luo Tiangong's true inheritance yet. His supreme-grade God weapon, Godly Eye technique, and supreme-grade divine level technique from the Star Secret Realm still existed in the Heavenly Bao continent. Clearly, the true center of the burial ground, the treasure area, has not been found yet. This is a chance for you latecomers. I wish you good luck. Whatever treasures you find in the Heavenly Bao continent, you will have to hand them over to the temple. The temple will exchange half the value of the treasures for contribution points. The better the treasure, the higher the contribution points. With enough contribution points, you can exchange for any treasures you need from the temple. Although they would only get half the contribution points if they handed over the treasures they obtained to the temple, they were still very excited. For low-level kings, supreme-grade mystic-level treasures were already something that could only be found by chance. As for God-level treasures, they were just legends. A supreme-grade mystic-level treasure was several times more valuable than a supreme-grade mystic-level treasure. In other words, if they obtained a supreme-grade mystic-level treasure in the Heavenly Bao continent and handed it over to the Dark Star Temple, even if they only got half the contribution points, they would still be able to exchange for 2 to 3 supreme-grade mystic-level treasures. As for God-level treasures, their value was even higher. A low-grade God-level treasure was worth more than 10 supreme-grade mystic-level treasures. This meant that if they obtained a low-grade God-level treasure, they would be able to exchange for at least 5 supreme-grade mystic-level treasures. Half the contribution points might seem like they had lost half of their gains, but in fact, it was already an extremely high return. If they did not enter the Heavenly Bao continent, it would be extremely difficult for a mere low-level king to obtain a supreme-grade mystic-level treasure, let alone a God-level treasure. Being able to enter the Heavenly Bao continent was a great opportunity in itself. It was a potential gain for a disciple of the temple. Therefore, it was fair to hand over half of everything they obtained in the Heavenly Bao continent to the temple. The next day, the peak master of the 10th peak, Mo Qingyang, brought Yixing and the other top 10 disciples of the 10th peak to the plaza of the Dark Star Temple's main hall. The Dark Star Temple had hundreds of thousands of disciples and occupied an area of 10,000 miles. Although the 10 peaks of the outer court had an area of more than 1,000 miles, it was only a small area of the temple. It was not even 1/10 of the temple's area. If a powerhouse who could see 10,000 miles looked down from the sky, he would realize that the Dark Star Temple's main hall was located in the center of the temple. The Dark Star Temple's main hall was more than 1,000 meters tall and more than 1,000 feet wide. It was extremely majestic and looked more imposing than an ordinary mountain. The plaza outside the main hall was even more spacious. It was about 10,000 meters long and wide. In the center of the plaza, there was a statue that was 1,000 meters tall. The statue was holding a black long spear and had pitch-black eyes. It was the founder of the Dark Star Temple, the Dark Star Emperor. It was Yi Xing's first time seeing such a majestic main hall and such a spacious plaza. It was also his first time seeing such a majestic statue. He was amazed. The disciples of the 10th peak were all from mid-level continents. Like Yi Xing, it was their first time seeing such a scene. They were amazed. On the plaza, the disciples of the other 9 peaks arrived one after another under the leadership of the peak masters. Most of these disciples were from 5-star clans. The 4-star and 5-star clans of the Dark Star continent were influenced by the style of the Dark Star Temple. The main hall of the clans was extremely majestic. When they arrived, they were only slightly surprised before they returned to normal. Most of the disciples from the 1st peak to the 9th peak glanced at the disciples of the 10th peak with a smile on their faces. It was like a group of superior people looking at the aborigines. These martial artists who were born and raised in the Dark Star continent had a sense of superiority in their bones towards the disciples from mid-level continents. Yi Xing felt something in his heart. A sharp gaze locked onto him and he immediately turned to look. It was a disciple of the 1st peak. He was a young man in purple with an arrogant face. He looked at Yi Xing with a cold gaze. Yi Xing had once negotiated with this person at Enlightenment Mountain. It was Xuezi. Xuezi was a top disciple of the 1st peak. It was not strange for him to be ranked in the top 10. Yi Xing frowned slightly. He had almost sealed Xuezi in the depths of his memory. However, from Xuezi's gaze, he could see that more than half a year had passed. He was still holding a grudge against him for the unpleasant negotiation at Enlightenment Mountain. Chapter 787. Xuezi smiled coldly when he saw Yi Xing looking at him. He said, "The 10th peak is full of good-for-nothings. A mere 9th-star supremacy is actually ranked in the top 10. Ha! If it was the 1st peak, even the disciple ranked in the top 1,000 could easily crush him." Even in front of Peak Master Mo Qingyang, Xuezi still mocked him. He, Xuezi, was a 5-star blue life. In the future, he would definitely become a quasi-god 5 nirvana. With the lifespan of a quasi-god and the strength of his family, he could almost certainly become a quasi-god 6 nirvana. If he encountered some opportunities, he might even have a chance to become a true god. Moreover, the Xue family's old ancestor was a true god expert and an inner elder of the Dark Star Divine Palace. Due to various factors, Xuezi's status was much higher than the other outer sect disciples. That was why she dared to mock the disciples of the 10th peak in front of Mo Qingyang. The 10th peak only recruited disciples from mid-tier continents. Since the establishment of the Dark Star Divine Palace, it had been tens of thousands of years, but the 10th peak had never produced a true God realm expert. In the Dark Star Divine Palace, only true God experts were considered to be in the upper echelons. From the 1st peak to the 9th peak, there would always be 1 or 2 true God experts every few hundred or 1,000 years. From this, it was clear that the 10th summit's peak master was not a good position. Mo Qingyang was a royal clan quasi-god. However, he was assigned to the 10th summit's peak master. His position in the clan was clearly very ordinary. With Mo Qingyang's status, it was hard for him to do anything to a disciple like Xuezi. Xuezi's words immediately drew a wave of laughter. To be able to rank in the top 10 among the disciples of the various peaks, which one of them did not come from an illustrious background? Many of them had true God experts in their families, and they were all 5-star families. The status of these disciples was not much lower than Xuezi, and some of them were even more prominent than Xuezi. Naturally, they would laugh without any scruples. Junior brother Qingyang, after you took over the 10th peak, the disciples under you are really getting worse and worse. The first peak's master, Mo Wendao, lightly smiled as he spoke. Among the outer sect's 10 peaks, the first peak had given birth to the most true God powerhouses and had always been the most outstanding bloodline. For Mo Wendao to be able to become the first peak's peak lord, his position was rather prominent. Although he couldn't be compared to a true God powerhouse, Mo Wendao was definitely one of the best among quasi-gods. One was the peak master of the first peak, while the other was the peak master of the 10th peak. Mo Wendao and Mo Qingyang had completely different statuses. Moreover, Mo Wendao was a 6th nirvana quasi-god, while Mo Qingyang was a 5th nirvana quasi-god. In terms of cultivation, Mo Wendao was superior. It was no secret that Mo Wendao and Mo Qingyang did not have a good relationship. This was also an important reason why Xuezi dared to mock the 10th summit without restraint. In the past, Mo Qingyang would have been livid. However, this time, Yixing, a 9-star supremacy, was a heaven-defying genius. Thus, Mo Qingyang was very happy to have such a disciple. In response to Mo Wendao's accusation, Mo Qingyang felt a sense of satisfaction, as if saying, "What do you know?" The corners of Mo Qingyang's mouth curled up slightly. Although he kept a low profile, he did not reveal too much joy in his heart. Yixing was born in a medium continent, but he had such heaven-defying strength. Mo Qingyang knew very well that Yixing must have had great opportunities. If such a person did not die, he or she would usually have great luck. In the Heavenly Bao continent, one's strength was not proportional to one's gains. Luck was the biggest factor in one's gains. Cultivators with great luck usually had good luck. Thus, Mo Qingyang had high hopes for Yixing's trip to the Heavenly Bao continent. He wanted to wait until the team left the Heavenly Bao continent. If Yixing's gains were the most bountiful, then he would release all the joy in his heart and slap Mo Wendao in the face. The disciples of the 10th summit did not think as far as Mo Qingyang. They were furious at the mockery of the disciples of the other 9 summits. In the 10th summit, they all had their own competition and did not have a harmonious relationship. However, in the entire outer sect, they were a whole. They were all disciples from medium continents and faced the mockery of the local disciples of the Dark Star continent. They had the same experiences and the same anger. Gao Jian was the one who could not hold back his anger. He said, "Senior brother from the first summit, you are wrong. Although senior brother Yixing is a 9-star supremacy, it does not mean that senior brother Yixing is weak. Senior brother Yixing is the strongest among the disciples of the 10th summit. He is invincible among the 3-star kings. How many of the top 10 disciples of the first summit can defeat an invincible 3-star king? You said that the disciple of the first summit who is ranked 1000 can easily defeat senior brother Yixing Ha. I know that the disciples of the first summit are very outstanding, but don't brag too much. It will make people laugh." Yixing's position was completely confirmed after he defeated Tu Qianzhang and took first place in the 10th summit's grand competition. During the grand competition, most of the disciples of the 10th summit did not think highly of Yixing. No one was willing to call Yixing, a 9-star supremacy, senior brother. However, Yixing had used his actual battle results to prove that he was the strongest among the disciples of the 10th summit. Strength was respected in the martial Dao. Yixing was ranked first, so he was the eldest senior brother of the 10th summit. Once his position was confirmed, the disciples of the 10th summit naturally changed the way they addressed Yixing. When they mentioned Yixing, they would add the word senior brother. Even the elite disciples who were ranked in the top 10 were no exception. Gao Jian's words surprised the disciples of the other 9 summits. This 9-star supremacy was the strongest among the disciples of the 10th summit. The 10th summit was the summit that had the least presence among the 10 summits of the outer court. The other 9 summits did not pay much attention to the 10th summit. Moreover, the results of the grand competition were announced yesterday. No one cared who had taken first place or who was in the top 10. This was because, according to the previous competitions, the top 10 of the 10th summit would have at most 1 or 2 4-star kings. However, the top 10 of the other 9 summits would have at least 5 or 6 4-star kings. It would be difficult for the 10th summit's first place to enter the top 5 among the other 9 summits. If one were to count the entire outer court 10 summits, the 10th summit's first place would not even be able to enter the top 40. Such a level would naturally be ignored and ignored. Even in this competition, the strength of the 10th summit's first place did not matter to the other 9 summits. After all, it was not a big deal. Therefore, no one cared who was first. However, when they found out that it was Yixing, a 9-star supremacy, who had taken first place in the competition of the 10th summit, the martial artists of the other 9 summits finally cared. A 9-star supremacy was only at the 9th level of the astral reaching realm. He had yet to break through to the astral sea realm and become a king. In the other 9 summits, all the disciples were kings. Even the weakest were kings. There was not a single astral reaching supremacy. Among the disciples of the first summit to the 9th summit, which one of them did not view astral reaching supremacy as ants? However, the ant in their eyes was actually the strongest of the 10th summit. How could a 9-star supremacy have such a heaven-defying strength? Everyone was shocked. This was unbelievable. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.